Got it. All right, Lindsay, I think we're ready to begin.
Welcome to the November 23rd, 2021 BAR small virtual meeting. My name is Lindsay Van Slambrook. The other board members present with me this afternoon are Glenn Gardner, Julia Martin, Bill Huey, and Fillmore Wilson. City staff present today are Kim Lavin, BARS Administrator, Frankie Pinto, Senior Preservation Planner, and Tori Fair, the Architect. The order of today's meeting will be as follows. First, we'll hear an introduction and overview of each application by the city staff for the benefit of the board and the public. This will be followed by an applicant presentation, which will be limited to 10 minutes. Any and all presenters should state your name clearly for the record, and anyone affiliated with the project, this would be owners, developers, designers, consultants, should speak during this period versus during public comment. By ordinance, the members of the board can ask questions of the applicant any time. By custom, we do so on the heels of the applicant's presentation. This will be followed by a period of public comment. If you are speaking as a member of the public, please state your name clearly for the record. Public comment will be followed by city staff comments and recommendations. And this will be followed by a 5-minute applicant response period. The purpose of this time is to clarify or to respond to anything raised during public comment or in the city staff comments and recommendations, not to reopen your presentation. Once we complete the applicant response period, all discussion will be closed, and this will be the time for board discussion and a vote. Please be aware that our operating procedure will be changing once we return to in-person meetings, the date of which is yet to be determined. Once we return to in-person meetings, we will discontinue the use of Zoom, but we will continue the live stream on our City of Charleston YouTube channel. The public may speak in person at the meeting or may submit written comments to be read at the meeting, but those comments must be submitted by 12 p.m. on the day prior to the meeting. Agenda items number 1 and 6 have been withdrawn this evening. And finally, please limit your comments to architecture only. Comments related to zoning, such as parking, traffic, lot coverage, and livability concerns are not within the purview of this board and cannot be voiced here. Now I will turn it over to Kim for some virtual meeting protocol.
Thanks, Lindsay. Staff will control the PowerPoint presentation that includes everything submitted by the applicant by the deadline in accordance with the submittal requirements. Applicants simply need to ask staff to advance to the next slide during your presentation. Applicants, staff, and board members are required to give their name whenever speaking. Video and microphone has been disabled for all attendees. Attendees, not board members or staff, will only be given the capability to speak when they're called on during the public comment period. Chat and Q&A functions have been disabled for everyone. No public comment. The applicants, all team members and the public have been required to register, indicate the project they wish to comment on, and submit any documents in advance of the meeting. Just as in an in-person meeting, all applications heard today are part of a public meeting format. If you've registered and will speak during the public comment portion of the meeting, you'll need to state your name and address for the record. Those members of the public that have registered will be called on in order by project. Staff will call on the registered members of the public to speak for each project. Unregistered members of the public unregistered members of the public who raise their hand will not be called on. The board members will be called on by the chairperson for comments and for their vote on a motion. Each member, when voting, should respond yay in favor or nay not in favor. The chair shall reread the motion verbatim for accuracy. If a board member needs to recuse, he or she will be temporarily removed from the meeting and placed back in the meeting at the start of the next agenda item. If the board needs to go into an executive session, they'll call into a separate conference line, and all video and audio on Zoom will be temporarily turned off until they're ready to return to the regular meeting. Results and staff comments will be posted to the city website at www.charleston-sc.gov/BAR. These proceedings are being recorded and broadcast to the City of Charleston's YouTube channel.
Thank you, Kim. Agenda item number 1 has been withdrawn by the applicant, and we are on agenda item number 2, 21 Bennett Street. Can you provide an introduction, please?
All right, 21 Bennett Street is requesting appeal of a staff denial for painting the roof piazza blue. The building is not rated. It's in the Charleston Village neighborhood. It was built in 1910 and in the old and historic district. Here's an aerial for some context on the south side of Bennett Street between Ashley and Gadsden. And here's the house. You can see the roof has a standing seam or 5B crimp with bridge cap. And it's currently painted red. And this is looking east on Bennett Street and looking west. And here's some Sanborn maps. This one from 1955 is the only one that's surveyed. So they did not survey the house prior to that. And with that said, I'll turn it over to the applicant for the presentation.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, I'm Dr. Brantley Tinsley. I am the new owner of 21 Bennett Street. I just asked for your consideration in allowing me to change the color of the existing non-galvanized single standing roof. It needs some repairs, and in doing the wash and the priming and the bondplex as needed to maintain the integrity of the roof, I just asked that I'm allowed to change to a piazza blue color. I was actually inspired by a house, 45 Church Street, south of Broad. I had submitted a photo. I don't know if you all had received it, but if you're able to Google 45 Church Street, south of Broad, it has some really nice aerial photos and just shows how, how well done the project is and how tasteful the color does look. It would be juxtaposed against kind of like an off-white color is what I'm intending to paint the siding. So that was my inspiration. And that's why I asked for your consideration for my project.
I added an image, 45 Church. Just so
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Dr. Tinsley. Are there any board questions? All right.
Yes.
Oh, Glenn, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if Kim is able to clarify how long ago that roof at 45 Church may have been painted, if we have any knowledge. I recall even the Stucco building on George Street was painted a much darker color when it was renovated. I'm just going to throw a dart at 18, 19 years ago. And that darker color very quickly oxidized. So I'm wondering if 45 Church may have been a very different color when it was last painted, and it just sort of has kind of worn to the present color. And I'm only asking that, just because I know the board reviewed the Stucco building on George Street at 14 George probably 2 years ago and kind of dealt with the same question.
Glenn, you are correct. This I checked out the file, and it looks as if that building on Church Street was painted between 1998 and 2005. There's no permit on record for it, but over the years it was repainted as is, and in those early photos, it looks to be a much darker primer gray color. So I believe that over the time, the as-is paint chip just became lighter and lighter, and therefore it's taken on a blue hue. That answers your question.
Thank you.
Any other questions from board members at this time? All right, we'll move on to public comment. Frankie, do we have anyone speaking from the public?
We do not have anyone signed up to speak for this.
Okay. We'll move on to city staff comments and recommendations. Kim?
Thank you. Metal roofs in Charleston are red, gray, or black. A piazza blue roof is certainly not appropriate. The applicant has used 45 Church Street as an example. As I mentioned before, the roof was approved as gray between 1998 and 2005 as a primer gray shade. Has certainly faded over the years, and in some light probably does take on the appearance of a pale blue. Staff continues to recommend denial. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Dr. Tinsley, did you want to respond or clarify anything raised in the staff comments and recommendations?
No, I just asked for your consideration. I can assure you, it would be tastefully done. The last thing I want to do is devalue the neighborhood or, become the eyesore of the street. So again, it's going to be a very pale blue color. It's a derivation of the paint blue that you would see on the underside of some piazza ceilings. So I just hope that you would please consider my proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tinsley. I will open it up now to board discussion and a vote.
Go ahead, Glenn.
I'll make a few comments. I will say that generally, I think the piazza ceiling blue is probably not an appropriate color for the roof coating. But in my experience, there have been many different colors of roofs around town. And so while the Tenner's red color is the most popular traditional color, I would not be opposed to seeing a different roof color that, is in keeping with some others around town, if it were to fit properly or to fit well into a paint scheme from the applicant. I don't know that, to me, the age of that roof that we saw at the beginning of the proposal, I feel like it is not an extremely old roof. And so I think it could have a little leeway, but I do think it should be a known color around town. There are several different grays, there are some greens, there are some browns, and there are the reds. And so in my book, I think there could be a little bit of leniency, but perhaps not the piazza ceiling blue.
Yeah, this is Bill.
Go ahead, Bill.
No, I'm sorry, Julia. You want to go ahead?
No, you're good.
Okay, thanks. I think Glenn made most of the points that I was going to make. And I agree with his comment about potentially maybe some leeway, again, finding examples of maybe roof colors that aren't necessarily on that short list. But I do definitely believe that the synopsis that Kim put forward about potentially maybe this roof having obviously initially been approved in a gray color and then fading over time, and then as matches were proffered for repainting the faded versions, it's just digressed into this color. It's very unusual, and I think not really in keeping with the Charleston palette. So I would say I do agree with staff's comments and recommendation, and Glenn's additional comment about maybe entertaining again, a found color, but maybe a little bit different color than that list. Thanks.
Cool. I'll just chime in, and I will say that Ms. Tinsley, Dr. Tinsley, I think that your goal of combining those colors is an admirable one. I think that those two colors together would be pretty, but hopefully you can do that on the siding, on the wood elements, the shutters, somehow somewhere else. And I would probably lean a little differently from Glenn and Bill in that the fact that this isn't a pristine roof, I sort of think you don't want to really draw attention to it with the big ridge caps and everything. So I'd personally be inclined to have it be a gray or just something a little bit more understated, and then have the color fun down on the siding with the windows and the trim. That's my feeling, but essentially I'm on board with what staff is saying.
Warren Wilson here. I agree with my fellow board members and staff's comments. I think that porch ceiling blue would be a highly unusual roof color in Charleston, even though I think there are a lot of options and tones within the more traditional palette.
All right, so I'll make a motion if we're done. Lindsay, do you have anything to add?
I do not.
Okay, I will make a motion for denial of the appeal of staff denial. Is that worded properly?
I think we wanted Yes. I think you can make a motion to uphold the staff's decision.
Okay. A motion to uphold the staff's decision.
We have a motion on the floor for a motion to uphold staff's decision. Do you have a second?
One more, I'll second.
All right, I'll put it to a vote. Bill,
Yay in favor.
Glenn,
Yay in favor.
Julia,
Yay in favor.
Fillmore.
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with a majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Dr. Tinsley.
Thank you.
Lindsay, may I just clarify? I think our motion would allow that applicant to return to staff with a different request. Is that correct?
Yes, I think so, because Kim, correct me if I'm wrong, but this can be approved at staff level. So this was purely an appeal. Okay, so yes, Glenn.
Okay, thank you.
Agenda item number 3, 48 Smith Street.
Madam
Bill?
Chairman, I'm sorry, very quickly, I'm going to be recusing myself for this application. You can put me in the waiting room, Kim.
Kim, please. Okay, it looks like Bill is gone. All right, now, Kim, if you will provide an introduction and overview, please.
Thanks, Lindsay. 48 Smith Street is requesting conceptual approval for the reconstruction and renovation of burned single-family house. The building was previously a Category 3 in the Charleston Village neighborhood, was built in the 1840s, and is in the Olden Historic District. And here's an aerial for a little bit of context. It's on the east side between Montague and Wentworth. And here are some previously existing site images. Here's the old house, looking south and southeast on Smith, northwest on Smith. And the applicant did put extensive Sanborn maps in the package, so I'll skip over those and turn it over to our applicant. You have the floor.
Good evening. My name is Eddie Faber with E.E. Faber Architects, and I have Joel Trantham from my office and Michael Strokel as well on the call. The new owners of 48 Smith Street are on as well, Mr. David Scheibel and his wife Emily. Very, very pleased to be able to bring you this project. It's been a difficult property for many prior to the Scheibels' willingness to jump in and take it on. Happy to be able to discuss it with you this evening. Next page, please, Kim. At staff's request, we included, and I'll try to move quickly, a significant amount of kind of prior history of the property, just to bring everybody up to speed. We've graphically demonstrated as clearly as we possibly could on the right of the page that this was all, again, respectfully done with other work and others prior, but felt like it was important to kind of provide the context of how the Scheibels came to this property. So with regard to the Sanborns, the single family house constructed probably late 1800s, early 1900s. 1902 Sanborn shows it with a smaller kind of kitchen carriage house and servants quarters to the rear. A 3-story element at the front with a kind of bay on it, which I'll hearken to later because it's been manipulated and had been prior. In the 1944, there were further additions to the quarters at the rear, additional modifications to the piazzas, and there are additional outbuildings on the property at this or shortly after this time. Next page, please. So again, well prior to our involvement and anybody else here, I believe, 48 Smith Street, again, you can see there were several outbuildings. It had been historically, well, I guess more recently prior to the fire, apartments. There were 8 to 10 apartments located in there. As I understand it, again, respectfully, somewhat difficult for the neighborhood. as those were occupied by students and parties and things of that nature. The rooms had all been divided, and it had suffered a lot of deferred maintenance. Next page, please. In 2017, there was a catastrophic fire. And again, reference photos that we were able to find at that time show that you could see it from the freeway, the causeway, and really just virtually destroyed, a significant amount of the interior of the structure. Next page, please. Photos from shortly after that, well, I guess 2 years later, the building, and despite repeated efforts by the city, and some of y'all may be aware of this, it was collapsing internally, falling apart, and there were injunctions and whatnot, but the owner could not be brought to task, I guess, and forced to save the building, protect it, tarp it, anything. So it kept falling apart. There were several people, I think, that were interested in the property, for what I know, and I don't know all of them, but many of them tried to propose developments, saving it, and it never quite worked out. I don't know why, but I imagine it was difficulty with the owner. But again, the building continued to collapse and fall apart. Next page, please. Again, just a quick summary of the repeated efforts were made to mandate stabilization. The building's been offered for sale, unofficially and officially. An additional round of buyers had a very serious and interesting development that was moving forward with the approval process. And the report from their end at that time was, again, and this was in 2020, that large sections of the roof were still collapsing. The third floor system had collapsed. It was no longer safe to enter the building. Second floor structural system partially collapsed, and the current condition posed a significant safety threat. So the building, again, was deemed unsafe by building inspections. Next page, please. The prior proposal, again, just for reference and respectfully, as I noticed, this was from the BAR file, and it was a project that Mr. Huey was involved in at the time, and thank him for the ability to use this. It was public record, but I know staff wanted to include it just for the history of what had happened to the property. So there had been a proposal to develop it and place some additional condominium buildings on the property, and rebuild the house at that time. It was going to be a total of 11 units with parking spaces, and all of these, I think, had worked through zoning and were going through BAR large at that time. Next page, please. The elevations, again, that were on file at the city of the building when that proposal had been developed, again, prior to the fire, as best anybody could discern, were provided. Those are shown there, and I'll point out to, most specifically to the left side top on the west elevation, the area that was an early addition to the original structure, had kind of different iterations of fenestration windows, and none of those necessarily quote unquote original. But it was in fact a 3.5-story structure pre-fire, with the first level being at grade. Next page, please. And then the proposal that had been developed prior, again for reference, was that structure was going to be reconstructed but raised to a level that allowed it to communicate with the buildings behind, maintaining 3.5 levels. Next page, please. And it was going to have some additional structures on it, all parking provided on site. And again, just for reference, it was 11 units with provided parking spaces and about 48% of lot coverage. Next page, please, sorry. So this was documentation, again, from the city prior to our involvement again. They had drones fly over it. Again, this was prior to even more significant collapses, but just even at that time, virtually inaccessible and literally a public safety hazard, most particularly for Smith Street and the neighbors to the north. Next page, please. More photos, again, just for reference of that time frame. Next page. We were contacted earlier this year by Emily and David Scheibel, and I can't speak highly enough of them and their willingness to take this on, and we are privileged and honored to be a part of it, because it was something they stepped in and knew there was an awful lot of work to do before they could even start designing the new house. But they made it very clear from the get-go, even with the directions from the city and the inspections that had been provided prior and that subsequently happened, that their intent was to reference what had been there, and it wasn't going to start off with something completely different, but something that would be appropriate for the neighborhood and the scale. Next page. As they moved forward with the project, the first step, to be honest, was just inviting city building inspections back over there to inspect, be on the site. This has been done periodically since they purchased the property. And at each time, it had been a directive with them and the engineer that there was just no way to save anything that was in there. It had collapsed in on itself, and to take it down. So the design you'll see this evening is for new construction of the house that goes there, with the reworking of the elements of the facade that we're able to maintain. But this element, again, just for clarity, it's been documented that it too will have to be dismantled and reconstructed, because the studs internal to that facade are completely charred and burned. So no way to literally deal with that without that coming down and being reconstructed. Next page, please.
Eddie, you've technically got about 2 minutes left, but I know that this is a large project, so
yeah, I appreciate it, Lindsay, if we could, because a lot of this stuff, it's not even to our project yet. We were just asked by staff to put the background info in it, which I feel like is important. So we'll continue to move as quickly as possible, and thank everybody for their patience. So for the buildings that remain, we were able to document them very clearly, in that there had been significant and alterations and modifications to them. Again, I'll move quickly through this, but in the initial kitchen house and carriage house, the areas that we've highlighted, windows that were doors, doors that were windows, that has been documented from interior and exterior. Plastic shutters that are screwed on, Lowe's windows, none of that material that you see there as far as windows and doors is historic, and the masonry's been reworked and done. And from the interior photos, you can tell that it's been different openings over the period of time. Next, please. What we have wound up with that we'll call our existing remaining structure, the kitchen house and the carriage house to the rear, the footprint of the original house, and the remnant of that facade. Next page, please. So those 3 levels are before you there. Next page. Then again, just deliberately illustrating what is existing presently, with the caveat again that the front facade has the charred members internally that require its removal and essentially reconstruction with what we're doing, and using what we can of materials to put that back. I'll point out on the existing rear of the carriage house, it's asbestos shingles. The next page, please. So we went through methodically in the kitchen house and able to document where existing openings were larger, greater, changed, and anything that we went back with the new design that was with the existing kitchen houses and carriage houses, took that into consideration, so that anything that we were proposing a new opening was being done so in one that either already existed or had been significantly modified. Next page, please. This is a documentation of the rear carriage house as you move from the interior of the current arched window to the rear of the property. And again, it's evident, and I know I have to move quickly, but as you look on that top row, the arch was there. Some of that work had been repointed relatively recently, I guess. Where the door and window was all one opening. Further down, it changes to one width of brick. Further down, it's actually wood construction with masonry on the exterior, different foundation, wood floor that had rotted out. Next page, please. The rear of it has a CMU addition and the asbestos shingles on the backside. Next page, please. So our site, I apologize, but now we're to the point of being able to show you what we're talking about doing it. It's a massive property. And again, I from all that we've talked to, I think everybody's very pleased that the intent of the Scheibels is to return it simply to a single family. No additional outbuildings other than a one level, very modest garage, and the rest is just beautiful open space. The building that would go back sits in the footprint of what had been there prior. Next page, please. Just some street context with reference to scale. Again, we have maintained the facade at this time. Again, just prior to review, so everybody can see that for scale. Next page, please. And as we went forward with the design, looked at the context of the neighborhood, and to be honest, even having lived in that general area many years ago, just wasn't aware of so many structures that are prominent and large, many of them 3.5 stories. Obviously the scale of the Wentworth mansions across the street. 63 Smith is 3.5 stories, 59, 67, several of those that you see at the bottom of your page, large structures. So the intent again with this was to return this property to a 3.5 story. Next page, please. These are elements that, again, we will definitely be referencing. This is what remains of the facade element. The intent is that the siding that we can remove and reuse will be done. The rest will be milled to match. The surround we're able to work with and put back together. The cornice elements of that, similarly. Bricks that were able to be salvaged have been. Charged shutters, things of that nature. We'll be doing same profiles. The elements to the far right is interior trim, so not necessarily all purview, but again, things that we definitely want to consider and reference as we move forward. Next page, please. As evidenced by the site design, Sheila Werdemer is working with the Scheibels on this. And you can tell, again, building goes back in the exact footprint of where it was prior. Small one-car garage on the southern side. I'm sorry, 2-car garage that just conceals a pool element to the back. And the rest is literally open space. One thing that I do think is worth pointing out here as we go forward, the prior house, prior to the fire, and all the lot coverage was roughly about 38%. Previous proposal with the condominium developments was going up to 48.5%. And currently proposed by the Scheibels, we are down to 24% for lot coverage, just for reference to open space. Next page. So the first level plan, again, is a usable, livable area. That's a site plan here that illustrates that in the relationship to the garage. Next page, please. The proposed garden level, as we call it, references and uses the motif of the internal piazza stair as the prior house had. The ground level spaces become usable. This area straddles a zone that allows it to be above flood, and in doing what we're proposing, we're able to do that and keep that ground space usable and maintain the 3.5 level structure. The elements to the rear become guest bedrooms, library, elements that you can see here in plan. Proposed first level, similarly, the formal house remains the same with its volumes as far as going back with the very similar motif to what was there presently. Again, nothing is technically binding them to do that, but it's in good faith, and their intent was that that's exactly what they wanted to do. So again, very fortunate that we're able to do that. Next page, please. Then the second level, again, 2-bedroom suites. Third level, 2-bedroom suites, quite simple. Next page. Again, just for reference, is streetscape with regarding to scale. Just so one can see that it clearly fits in with a reference with the prior photo pages that has 3.5 level structures all around this block. It very much appropriate scale in our opinion. Next page, please. The proposed elevations are Smith Street elevation. And for reference, on the west elevation, top left, the mass that you see that has the 6 windows below the gable and above the foundation is essentially what is there now. So it's literally something that we would be reconstructing using the material that we have, matching existing to have that remain. The door surround, similarly so, using that as reference. And the element from the proposed rear east is not visible from the public right away, but the view of that. The south garden hyphen element is also not visible, very recessed. And then the proposed design for the kitchen house and the carriage house that takes advantage of the areas that have been modified before to simplify and organize those elements. Next page. Blow up of the front elevation. And I know there have been some comments or thoughts about the element off to the northern side that's recessed. Again, per the prior Sanborns, and again, I got to stress, this is certainly not intended to be a reproduction, but again, I think it's very directly referenced and respected. But as that element too had been an addition to the original house, this too we feel like best reads as one. And with its distance from the street, that the design with the windows in that elevation allow that function to kind of be a little more apparent. Next page, please. South elevation towards the courtyard, and the awesome staircase that was the element that was used in the prior structure that we are looking at to put back here. The ground floor again is maintained as a story, as are the levels above. So maintaining the 3.5 level structure, and the building sits at the height that allows it to align with the kitchen house to the rear and connect those spaces. Next page, please. This is the rear elevation. The accessory structure to the left is again not visible from public right away, but the backside of the garage element doubles as a pool house shaded structure. Next page, please. North side elevation, again not visible from the public right away, but an awful lot of thanks to the neighbor and the church that owns that property that has allowed us to maintain scaffolding there to have this work proceed, and lent their full support. Next page. Two, 3 elevations or 4 elevations, excuse me, of the carriage house, which again sets a good bit back from the street behind the existing wall, garden wall, and then the proposed new garden wall by Wertimer that would offer some privacy to the rear yard, which again, as you saw from her plan, is essentially open space. Next page, please. And the idea with the carriage house, or excuse me, yeah, garden, garage is in fact that it doesn't need to make a statement other than something that's a garden element, and very much something that's kind of minimal, recessed back, becomes part of that property in the greenscape rather than a structure, another outbuilding of some sort that's visible. Last page is just a perspective of what's presently proposed. We have made the rounds with immediate neighbors several weeks ago and dropped off letters and notices that if anything was of any concern, knowing that this was coming up and we were working on this project, please let us know. We hadn't heard. We were grateful to Pratt Thomas's to the south, Mr. Carrera across the street, Mr. Seekings on the backside, that everybody that's been abutted this property is pleased with it. Thank you for the input and support of Historic Charleston Foundation, Preservation Society, and our meetings with the Neighborhood Association for the same. So apologize for the length of this, but I think it warranted it, and thank you all for your support. Happy to answer any question.
Ready. Do my fellow board members have any questions for the applicant?
I have a couple. Eddie, can you just explain like the reasoning for elevating it? It's just because you don't want steps up on the interior?
Yeah, it's below flood presently, a portion of it. Julia, and it's technically a story. So it was above 6 feet in height on that ground level. And to maintain that as a story, it has to be above flood. If we don't do that, we have to go to variance to keep that space below. And as we looked at it from a scale and everything, it's not necessarily the existing structure that we're raising, it's a new construction. And the proposal accommodates FEMA without having to go to a variance. Anything that didn't go for a variance, the structure would essentially sit on the ground, or have an unusable space below, or not. It wouldn't be able to still have the 3.5 story that it had and is so prominent in the neighborhood.
Okay. It wasn't ever like a finished space before, right? I'm just trying to figure out.
It was a full story. I mean, there was stuff under there from best I could tell,
Right.
but it qualified as a
Filler.
story.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's just something that made sense for this, that it could entertain and engage the garden. And rather than just have something below that's completely useless, the proposal was, and the design studies that we did with different heights were, if this allowed this property to be maintained and live in as a single family in a way that didn't, overpower the street, which I don't believe it does by everything we've demonstrated, that this was a good way to go with the new construction on this site and accommodate FEMA without having to go to a variance.
Okay.
Eddie,
Yeah,
if I can
I
jump
don't-
in just to clarify, Eddie, there is no opportunity to get a variance. You are essentially asking for additional height from this board.
Mhm.
So just wanted to clarify that.
All right, and then one little follow-up, Eddie, I think, what is it, an AE10? Is that the
Yes,
zone, the
ma'am.
flood zone?
I
Okay,
think at the front, yes, correct.
all right. I think, it seems like, are you calling out for 11.6 finished floor? I think it might have to be 12, since it's new construction, but just something to think about. Because new construction has a 2-foot freeboard, right?
Say, excuse me. Oh, because of its attached. And Joel, do you mind if you weigh in? I mean, my technical support is here if I can wait, because it's trying to, but the idea is that it lands on the new house. So being it's that attached to, the kitchen house at the back was where that was. So working with a historic structure to the rear was the premise we used, so it didn't have to go higher.
Yeah, and,
Right.
and under the FEMA, it allowed for a 1-foot freeboard for a substantial improvement to an existing structure.
Right, I'm just not sure that, I don't know, it's up to you guys and Ken, but I'm not sure he would be able to count, this new house as a substantial improvement. Whatever, it's a 6-inch question, I just thought I'd throw it out there.
Sure.
And that previous concept with the multifamily proposal did go to BAR, right? But it did deferred or something? What was
Yes,
the-
from all I know from history, and if somebody knows better, feel free to weigh in, is that I think the concern at that time was the condos and their final development of how that was going to work out. And I don't know if the back and forth between them and the owner or whatnot kind of derailed the deal. But yes, it had gone to BAR large and was deferred for restudy of the condo elements. And it wasn't that they couldn't happen, because again, what's allowable on this site obviously is significant. It was just that they needed to be fine-tuned before they came back for final.
Cool, thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other board comments at this time? Excuse me, board questions?
Let me ask one more of staff or Eddie. So is there a question here about additional height? Are we considering that, or is it, I don't know, is this a 3-story district with the option for an additional half-story? Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So this is a 3-story and they are allowed to request additional height. They are allowed to ask for additional height into the attic space. But there again, do we have an old building here or do we have new construction? So this does qualify as 3.5 stories, their proposal.
Thank you.
Any more board questions at this time? All right, we'll move on to public comment. Frankie, do we have anyone speaking from the public?
We do. First, we have April Wood.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the application for conceptual approval for the reconstruction and renovation of 48 Smith Street. We've been concerned about this property for several years, and we are very pleased to see a plan to return this property to a single-family house. We recommend approval of this application, and we respectfully recommend or request that this project be expedited through the permitting process to prevent any delays which may cause further deterioration or instability. Thank you.
Thank you, April. Frankie, do we have anyone else speaking from the public?
Yes, we also have Catherine Carroll.
Thank you. Anna Catherine Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society is incredibly supportive of the effort to reconstruct this notable historic building in a timely manner. Planning for the future of this site has been an ongoing challenge for several years, and we are so thrilled to see a proposal to reconstruct the house in its previously existing form with a return to its historic use as a single-family residence. Given the level of documentation available, and because the house was lost due to an unforeseen and unfortunate circumstance, we are supportive of building back in the character of the previously existing house and would encourage the form, materials, and detailing to be as consistent as possible. In that vein, we feel the vertical section of windows visible from the street on the setback mass of the west elevation are incompatible and should be eliminated. Additionally, we feel that the large vertical windows proposed toward the rear of the south elevation are also out of scale and inconsistent with traditional architecture. While we recognize the rear portion of the building will be minimally visible, we encourage studying the proportion of the fenestration to be more in keeping with the style of the building. Lastly, on the kitchen building, it seems that the first leftmost opening on the oldest part of the building was originally an arched carriage opening, so we're supportive of its restoration as proposed. However, we would encourage differentiating the later openings as to not give the false impression that there were historic carriage openings in these locations as well. We would like to once again reiterate our strong support for this project and are hopeful that it will move forward this evening with these comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna Catherine. Frankie, is that all for public comment?
That's all we have signed up.
All right. Kim, if you'll give city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Thanks, Lindsay. I'm going to start off on a little bit somber note. It's very unfortunate to have lost this important historic building while it's been deteriorating for many years. This is a stark reminder for the staff, the city of Charleston, in particular, the BAR and livability that the policy and process for demolition by neglect must be addressed and that this type of deferred maintenance cannot be allowed to continue. There is a loss in historic fabric that obviously the city cannot bring back and a loss of revenue, frankly, when homeowners are not held accountable. That said, and with renewed optimism, this is a new owner and a new applicant. We're very pleased to see the spirit of the house being revived and more life brought back into the neighborhood. Many interested stakeholders have put in great effort to get where this applicant is now, and you're to be commended for your determination. That said, we feel this building should be rebuilt in the same place to weave the new in with the existing re-additions that have survived the fire. The foundation that exists should be preserved in situ and bolstered and rebuilt where necessary. The property is in an X zone and does not require elevation to where it was previously at 18 feet 9 3/4 inches, and certainly not to where the proposed 21 9 3/4 inches. The building shall have a finished floor no higher than previously existed. Fenestration of the building should be appropriate and cohesive. The ribbon window and the large floor to ceiling windows will be visible from Smith and also Wentworth, and they are not appropriate and should be replaced. Generally, modifications to historic openings aren't recommended, but given the evidence of major evolution, simplifying the openings of the rear building is appropriate. So we're recommending deferral with staff comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Eddie, did you want to clarify or respond to anything raised in the public comment or in the city staff comments and recommendations?
Yes, please. It is a difficult project for everyone and something to tackle, but even respectfully to some of the staff comments, the reference to the side element as if it's still there and it's not. So, I mean, a modification, it is a new construction on an existing base. The base has to be fortified and most likely with a bond beam or something of that nature. It is 3.5 story. It is space that qualifies as such. And it seems like sometimes, you know, if we can argue out of both sides of our mouth on that, but to deny this owner the use of that space would be unfortunate, particularly for someone that is taking this on and going to an absolutely extraordinary length to do something that's good for the city. I mean, I don't think anybody could deny that it's a win-win for the city, for the neighborhood, for everybody. That if it falls out of their hands to somebody else, again, not that it couldn't be done nicely, but it'd be going to be a very different project and a very different development. That what we feel is done well, and most particularly merits the height. I understand staff's concern with setting precedent, but if there's ever a case for something like that to be allowed and for this to be maintained and allow this to happen and function in this manner, I would think that this is it.
Thank you, Eddie.
Thank you.
All right, I'll open it up for board discussion and a vote at this time.
All right, I'll go first. This has clearly been a property that we've all been concerned about for a long time, and it really is unfortunate that it's to the point now where really nothing is going to be preserved. But I appreciate the applicants and the buyers, the new owners' dedication to figuring it out and retaining the spirit of what was there. It brings up a number of philosophical questions that I've been wrestling with, like the questions about replicating something that's gone, and then questions about having sort of modern elements introduced as if they were interventions to something historic. But I mean, overall, I think this is a good proposal. I personally am okay with the carriage house doors, all of them. I am convinced that those openings have been changed a lot over the years. And I think I am on board with them being able to use the ground floor. I'm not at all sure how that is going to reconcile itself with the existing foundation possibly being preserved. I don't see how that's possible, but maybe it is. And if it's the owners and the neighborhoods and the architect's desire to replicate what was there, I think that could be done. It'll be really hard because, the craftsmanship that existed when this was built is not easy to come by nowadays. But I think it's a fine proposal. The one thing that I just can't quite wrap my head around is the juxtaposition of the styles on this house that's going to be built in 2022. I just feel like the modern elements sort of give a false sense of history that I would probably love if the old house was there. It just kind of makes me a little dizzy to try to reconcile those two with a house that's built all at once. But yeah, thank you to the owners. Oh, and I will just say that for the record, I personally am not opposed to density on the peninsula. I think density is good in an urban area, but I totally understand why neighbors are happy that this is going to be just one family on this parcel. So that's all I've got.
I'll jump in next. Fillmore Wilson here. I want to follow up a little bit with what Julia had said, and there is a bit of a philosophical conundrum here, and certainly you can come down on either side of that argument. I think the desire to, in essence, since this house was lost so unfortunately, I think the desire to, in essence, recreate it in the 21st century is I'm okay with that. I think that the house will be built with modern materials, and even if the detailing, design, and construction certainly follows the pattern and mimics the details of the old house, I think to any reasonably discerning eye, this will read as a 21st century building. I think it's very difficult. It's going to have to meet current code requirements. I think it would be difficult to do all that in any reasonable fashion and not have this read as a modern building that is in the architectural style and detailing of the original house. I do agree with staff's comments about the windows. I think that if you're going to recreate this house or fundamentally recreate it on its original footprint, that the architecture and particularly the detailing of the architecture would best be consistent. And I agree with Julia that introducing modern changes that appear to be over time is probably not what this project needs. In a perfect world, I would want to see the first floor at the original height of the historic building, but I am somewhat loath to penalize the owner taking this rather extraordinary step to restore this house. I am loath to penalize them for wanting to have a continuous floor elevation throughout the entire project. And I think, again, you know, the 3-foot change in elevation, I don't think does any damage to the concept of this design. And so I really don't have a problem with that. I think the fenestration in the existing historic outbuildings should be, I think it has been changed all over the place, but I think that a really careful study and trying to make the interior design work and as closely as possible maintain some historic accuracy in the fenestration is a worthwhile undertaking. And again, I will reiterate what's been said, that I applaud the owners and Eddie for taking this on. This is a daunting task.
Glenn, I will go next. And I think Julia and Fillmore have said a lot of what I was going to, or a lot of what I had made notes say as well. So Fillmore, I am very closely aligned with your comments, and I'll just hit quickly on the points that I think are most important. Because I think the board and the staff recall, I think we were all very displeased with the action, or I guess the inaction of the former owner, and the behavior that happened there as a property owner, I think is absolutely unforgivable. And the city should never allow this to happen again, because so much more of this home could have been saved if the wheels had been turning at the right pace and if procedure had been able to be followed and enacted. So the board and the staff and the neighbors spent a lot of time attempting to save the shell of what was there, and the system failed us on that. So I hate that. But that said, we have a new owner, a new project here, and I am grateful that that they have taken this on. And my comments very quickly are kind of picking between what I think are the important things to hold fast on and the things that I think they can have a little leeway on. In looking at the scale of the streetscape, I echo Fillmore's comment about the fact that 3 additional feet really, I don't think is a negative to the streetscape in the neighborhood. So I think keeping, they're very close to having a usable floor down at ground level, and that's something that I feel I can support. The fenestration in the back carriage houses, I am comfortable with nearly all of what is being proposed, and I know a lot of what had been there was altered. The new proposed garage building, I have no issue with. I think it is appropriate in scale and sort of disappears. And then I guess the biggest element to me is an agreement with what Julia and Fillmore and staff have said with regard to the scale of the new proposed windows. And I think that needs some dialing in and a little less juxtaposition there. But in general, I commend the fact that, that this is hopefully moving forward finally and will no longer be a blight on an otherwise nice streetscape.
Lindsay, do you have anything to add to that?
No, you all, I really echo the comments from fellow board members and staff. I think this is a really nice design. It's really encouraging to hear that the neighbors on board and the preservation groups are on board as well. So especially learning the history of this project. I too commend the owners on taking this on. It's a really nice design, and I have nothing to add.
To my fellow board members, are you strongly inclined one way or the other between deferral and conceptual approval?
I would support conceptual approval, you know, with most of staff's comments and any board comment that might enforce some of the discussion that we've had, if my fellow members feel that a board comment is necessary.
I agree with that, Julia and Fillmore. I think that you know that there are certainly some tweaks and some things here that need to be looked at and studied, but I think they have certainly made a lot of progress, and I think they deserve to continue moving forward as a result of the steps that they've taken.
Well, I'm going to float a motion for conceptual approval with all of staff's comments except for number 4. And I don't have any particular board comments that I would add to that. Fillmore and Glenn, do you have anything you'd like to suggest?
Anything, Glenn?
Yeah, I really don't. I mean, it's conceptual. I mean, you know, we know that Eddie knows how much detailing is required to build this to the quality that they're suggesting, and I think that would be at the preliminary level that we would see a whole lot more detail.
Awesome. All right, so that's my motion.
Yeah.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for conceptual approval with staff comments 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Glenn. I'll put it to a vote. Fillmore?
Yay in favor?
Julia?
Yay in favor?
Glenn?
Yay in favor.
The chair votes with the majority, and the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. May I ask one very quick question, if it's possible to forward us staff comments, just so we know which ones are being referenced? I didn't get a screenshot quick enough, so thank you.
Will do, Eddie.
Thank y'all. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
We also need to bring Bill back in before we move. Oh,
He's in.
that was quick. All right, agenda item number 4, 119 and 121 Broad Street. Kim, please provide an introduction for us.
119 and 121 Broad Streets requesting conceptual approval for a new pool and 1-story pool house. The building's category 2 in the Charlestown neighborhood and was built in 1803. It's in the old and historic district. Here's an aerial showing you the property just on the south side of Broad between Orange and Legree Streets. And here's some existing site images. This is looking down the driveway, and this is the east wall and the west wall. And looking east on Broad Street and looking west. That wall and fence is part of the property. There's the Sanborn maps from 1888, 1902, and 1944. And with that all said, I'll turn it over to the applicant for the presentation. You have the floor.
Mr. Stevenson, you're on mute.
Oh, thank you, Kim. Do you have the video that was sent by any chance?
I do.
Okay. All right.
Let me cue that up.
Okay. Well, so this is this house. It's actually original structure was built in the 1800s early. I mean, you can imagine Meeting Street was a dirt road back then. And then later on in the 1800s, the second and attic floor were built, and they added this big addition in the back. And it's remained this size property for its existence. It's pretty impressive. The Archdiocese bought it in 1958, I believe, and had done lots of different renovations. None of them were really good. They added an elevator and took out a large piece of the back and put a vault in it. And anyway, they in 2018, apparently there were some developers who were planning on buying this from the Archdiocese and subdividing it and building 4 additional houses on the property. And so my client, who is a local star, is Darius Rucker. He and a friend heard about this, and so they bought the property to save it so that it wouldn't fall into that fate of being subdivided, because they, this is such a really amazing piece of property. And their intention was really to renovate it, do a nice renovation, and then sell it. And just, I don't know, about a year or so ago, 2 years, year and a half ago, they realized, like, this is such a magnificent piece of property that maybe they should keep it and be Darius's place. He could stay downtown and, do some, I mean, they're doing a really magnificent renovation of the main house. And they're kind of undoing everything the Archdiocese did and preserving all of the historical fabric, and then really just going in and making it into a super nice contemporary, livable house. So what we're looking at here is part of what they would like to do. Instead of having 4 big houses built on the property, they wanted to preserve the property and create and put a swimming pool in. And really what we've done is designed a nice little folly, which, is, you find them all over Charleston. Charleston is well known for these cool little houses. We took a lot of the referenced some of the design of the main house just to kind of make it feel in place. But ultimately, it's really just like a fun little building that services this pool. There's going to be a much denser landscaping plan for the privacy. So this will be much less seen from the street, but ultimately it's just a 1-story, small, kind of a low impact building. And we've kind of preserved the parking in the back. Another aspect of this is that they would like to introduce another driveway. It's such a big property. And Darius has these buses that come in that pick him up, and they block up Broad Street. And it's kind of a mess. And so to have something that could pull in completely and just drive around, which also gives an opportunity to put less importance on what the main driveway is now, which really kind of cuts the main house off from the property. And we'd kind of like to move the drive over to the other side of the property. And I'll show you, do you want to just run, you will get a better idea of what we're looking at. Do you mind playing the video?
Can you hear the sound?
Nope.
There's sound? Cool.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's just
It's
music.
funny because my renderer originally put in some kind of like fun house music, and I was like, "This is we're presenting this to the BAR. Can we put violins or something?" But you can see the house it's taking a nod from the piazza, and then the landscaping is not represented properly here, but this is the design, and we've listening to some of the remarks we've had from various people, I've actually taken this and I've tried to redesign it to different types of massing. And at the end of the day, the owner just really likes this design. And we feel that it's such a low impact, and it's like so much better than putting houses on here. It's really there. I'm hoping that y'all will agree that it's just kind of a fun little folly. It's you know, in someday if somebody wants to put something, you know, restore a yard, they can tear this down and do some other landscaping. But right now it's like, this is, you know, we've got the proportions and the detailing is just to kind of fit in and make a fun little structure. So please if you have any questions, please be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Do my fellow board members have any questions for the applicant?
This is Bill. You know, what's the footprint overall dimensions of this structure?
So let's see, we've got it's about 30-foot square if you took the whole structure from column end to column end.
Okay, thank you.
The columns are about 6 feet on center. So if that gives you any idea. And maybe if you could advance this to show maybe one of the renderings, which I think trying to show that a little more in dimension. There you go.
And then the how high, I guess the eave line of this, how high is it?
It's 10 feet. Actually, the eave line is a little taller than that. I think it's probably about 11.5 feet. Originally, I was trying to get it to kind of be the same as the main house, but we toned it down a little bit because just getting the proportions right.
Thanks.
May I just ask, because I'm only on one screen today, may I ask to go back to the full site plan, please?
Want me to zoom in a little bit, Glenn?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Any other board questions at this time? All right, we'll move on to public comment. Frankie, do we have anyone speaking from the public?
We have several. First up is April Wood.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the application for conceptual approval for a new pool and one-story pool house at 119 to 121 Broad Street. We are generally supportive of this application, but we strongly believe that substantial screening should be added to obscure the view of the pool and structure from the street and gate. Thank you.
Thank you, April.
Next, we have Anna Catherine Carroll.
Thank you. Anna Catherine Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society really appreciates the applicant reaching out to us to discuss this project. Given this is a Category 2 property and the proposal is slated for a prominent location on a double lot with an unobstructed view from a busy public right-of-way, we urge the board to apply a high degree of scrutiny. We acknowledge that this is a unique building that could handle a creative approach to an accessory structure, but are concerned by the aggressive program proposed for this historically undeveloped, highly unique double lot. Overall, we feel the footprint, height, and architectural expression need to be simplified significantly to be more deferential and contextual in relation to the main building. Specifically, we feel the roof deck element should be eliminated and the overabundance of detail should be scaled back. Lastly, we are concerned about the proposed alteration and partial demolition of large sections of the perimeter site wall, which we feel is also being driven by the program. This wall is a historic character-defining feature that is typical of Charleston site planning and streetscape patterns and is important to preserve. So based on the level of restudy needed, we're not supportive of the project moving forward at this time, and we encourage the applicant to study a design that is more compatible with the site. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna Catherine.
Next up, we have Mr. Wetzel.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Wetzel.
Well, thank you. We're abutters. We live at 50.5 Legree Street, and we're speaking not only for ourselves, but also Mike Moore, who is at 50 Legree Street. We both are abutters, and we look over this property, and we have very serious concerns about the impact on the neighborhood, which is a very quiet residential neighborhood on Legree Street. And we believe that based on the scale and the drawings that I've submitted, that this will be a tremendous impact on the lighting, viewscapes, and noise character impact onto the neighborhood. As an example, both of our houses have bedrooms looking out over the property. We already are faced with 24/7 lighting for the parking that's there now. I can imagine with a pool and the structure and the lighting there, we would end up with a lot more a lighting impact. We all have views of the cathedral and the tower, and of course the Falcon, who's up there quite often. And we think that this is inappropriate for our neighborhood. We are also concerned about the loss of 2 to 3 parking places on Broad Street, because during the church services, weddings, etc., those spaces are used 24/7, or as often as they can be. And the third point I wanted to bring up is that we are very concerned because we have never been notified about this project. We first learned of it when we saw a sign on Sunday night on our way to the library. That was the first that we heard of this. So their neighborhood, even though we're trying to pull people together, and we have not had very much time. Thank you very much. I appreciate listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Wetzel.
Okay, last up, we have Carrie Agnew.
Hi, I am Carrie Agnew. I live at 52 Legree Street. My bedroom directly looks out over the current parking lot. And as Larry mentioned, some of those parking spaces would be removed. I was actually with Larry and his wife on Sunday evening when we first learned about this happening. We were never approached. And I believe that that is what is supposed to happen when you approach neighbors, when you are proposing something that is going to impact them. I have spoken with Paul Soldados. He is the owner of 54 Legree. He is even more impacted than I am. He will be directly across from your pool house. We are, as Larry stated, that there are a myriad of issues. There's lighting, there's time of use, parties. The fact that this is a folly and supposed to be fun did not give me any feelings of that did not make me feel good. parking is liquid gold in Charleston, and taking parking away on Broad directly across from the cathedral is a terrible idea. We already suffer on our street, which is one way, with parking. And now we will just be having more of that. The elevation itself of the pool house, it looks like a Greek temple. How is that Charleston? This is not your typical residential pool house. I mean, a pool is one thing, a pool house is another thing, but we are not, I don't know. I mean, late night barbecues and roof decks with people partying into all hours. I mean, I know we've got a noise ordinance. It doesn't start till 11. We are adamantly opposed, and I can speak very much for Paul Sodatos in echoing that. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Agnew. Frankie, do we have anyone else speaking from the public?
No, that was all that signed up.
Okay. All right. Kim, if you'll give us city staff comments and recommendations this time.
Thank you, Lindsay. While a pool house is certainly a widely constructed secondary building on a historic property, this project has several extraordinary conditions to take into account, which make the design atypical. The siting of the pool house is completely unprecedented. Historically, secondary buildings are located in the rear of a property. There's no pool house in Charleston that sits with such visibility, size, and breadth as this one does. This location and scale should be studied. If a pool house is deemed acceptable, it should follow the pattern and rhythm of historic properties in Charleston. While the building is set back from the street, the only screening is vegetation, which shall be excluded from consideration. While the building is being presented as a folly, it should not be used to exceed typical or appropriate bounds. Further, a folly by definition is a small decorative building meant to enhance the natural landscape. The open air pavilion nature of the design with roof deck and bar is not characteristic of an historic property, nor is the massive size of over 30 feet by 30 feet. Section 54-306 states an accessory building is permitted to have an eave height of 11 feet. The building appears to have an eave height of 12 feet with an added 3-foot parapet wall height. Technically, an 11-foot eave height would meet the requirement, but does not meet the intent to reduce the height of a secondary building. The roof deck should be eliminated in its entirety. The lawn and hardscaping provide plenty of space for the homeowner to enjoy the property. The roof deck and parapet wall extend past the building's enclosed footprint, giving the building a top-heavy appearance, and again should be eliminated. The additional penetration of the historic wall for 3 additional gates should be eliminated. There's no significantly compelling reason to do so. Staff's recommending denial of staff comments.
Thank you, Kim. Mr. Stevenson, did you want to respond to anything, respond or clarify anything raised during the public comment or in the city staff comments and recommendations?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I apologize to the neighbors. I actually felt like this was such a low impact building that there's, it's not going to interfere with anybody's light but I'm happy to go and talk to them as we further develop this. Again, I think this is really just a building for the owners to enjoy. I don't see this going to be like raging parties, but if there are ordinances and rules for that. As far as the parking, this house accommodates way more parking than is necessary, but we're just keeping the parking that's there. The house, it is a very large piece of property, so the driveway I think would be just help the main house gain connection, and figuring that if the house were subdivided and there were other buildings built on the site, which is what was proposed originally, there would be another driveway and curb cut, and all that would happen anyway. So I continue to argue that this is a low impact building. And I don't know if we need to present the denser landscaping or screening that would help shade this from the street. I'm happy to talk to the neighbors about, maybe there's some plantings or something that would create more privacy. I know that the owners would like more privacy as well. I think that could all be handled. I think that the having a pool, of course, if there's parties going on late at night, that would have to be addressed, obviously, but I think it's all addressable. And as far as the structure being located where it is, I think that's a great location for that structure. I mean, it's going to be a prominent part of the house and the estate, and how the enjoyment of the property by the owners. So, we'll continue to address the issues, but I don't feel like this is really like overdoing it at all. That's been presented by some other thoughts in this presentation, but we remain open to as we move through the design.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. I'll open it up for board discussion and a vote at this time.
I'm happy to go first, and then I may come back. But I think the reason I was asking about going back to the site plan is that it's a really great location. It's a huge lot, and I think the biggest word here is opportunity. And I think there is a great opportunity for a pool house, or a folly, for parking, for landscaping, for activity. But I think what this is missing is the first step of a really great site plan that is sensitive to the neighborhood, to the streetscape, and to the historic home it is part of. And I think every bit of that is doable, but the site plan really needs some careful thought, some careful consideration before the architecture of the pool house is even really on the table, I think. And I was looking, and I don't know, and I guess I will ask the applicant, have you already talked with the state and the city? Could you establish a second curb cut there if the BAR were to approve opening that historic wall?
That's a good question. We've been in contact with SCDOT. They're not easy to work with, as you know. So we are not completely sure that we can do it, but you have to ask for it to start somewhere. So it's a desire from the owner, and I think it would be a great addition to this property, but it's not approved yet.
Okay, thank you. I think before I would ever think the board should consider again, it gets back, I think the driveway and Park Drive's site plan, if the board were or weren't to consider opening the wall, an opening into the wall, that is a complete game changer for the site plan itself, I think. And knowing how difficult the city and DOT are, that would be a really tall order and would take a lot of time, I would think. So it kind of comes back full circle, as I'm kind of struggling a little here for words. I think the site plan really, really needs to be a very carefully considered, customized, detailed plan that I think you could get circulation for the owner through the existing gate. But I've looked at the ironwork, and I've looked at that wall. There are times when I think we can consider maybe opening one panel of a wall, but in this case, I think it's a really heavy ask to add the columns and pedestrian gates and a driveway gate.
I think that was all well put, Glenn, and I agree that it's a wonderful property, and there's got to be a great way to incorporate a pool and a pool house. I'm afraid it just needs a little more study conceptually. Like what I'm seeing here on the screen just looks, I don't, it just looks foreign to Charleston somehow, more California or something.
This is Bill. Yeah, I tend to agree with staff's comments regarding the structure, the size of the structure, and the height of the structure also. I think and also I might add the articulation and detailing of the structure. I'm not quite pulling the folly reference there. I usually think about folly as kind of a diminutive little garden house or little garden element. And we've approved recently a couple of pool houses I think were done really well. Very tasteful, but much more diminutive in size, I think, to what we're seeing here. And I think Glenn's point is very well taken. The fact that potentially the whole orientation of the site plan may be different if that component of ingress is not, in the plan. So, as far as I would support a motion would be staff's recommendation, and I think clarification to what I think I would like to be seeing would be maybe a little less of a stylized interpretation and also more diminutive solution for the structure itself.
Fillmore Wilson here. I don't really have anything to add. I think my fellow board members and staff have covered this issue really well, and I think Glenn certainly hit the nail on the head. I think that this structure is way ahead of appropriate planning for the overall site, and so I support staff's recommendation.
So the staff recommendation we have is for denial with staff comments, and I mean I generally support that, but I don't want to discourage the applicant. In my book I think that a pool house or a folly, either one really, I think can be accomplished here. They have the land and the room to do it, and I think we really need to see a very sensitive approach that I think blends well with the architecture that's already there and takes the neighbors and neighborhood into consideration. And then I really feel like they would need, before we can consider any thought of opening that front wall, I think we would need to see that DOT and the city would even look at it. Unless the board wants to kind of go ahead, I'd love to just give him as much directive as we can. And so if the board feels the wall is sacred and can't be touched, then I think we should go ahead and probably tell him that, to avoid spending a lot of time communicating with the state, because I do that often or fairly frequently, and it is a lengthy, drawn out process to get a curb cut. Do my fellow members have any? Should we let him know about the? Would we consider opening that wall or not?
I think that the proposed plan for the wall, I would not support. I think you would have to think long and hard about any serious modification to that historic structure. I'm not saying that there isn't some small modifications that might be made to it that would be appropriate, but I don't see them on this plan. And I think it's, again, it's the horses kind of before the cart here, because you would have to clear all that with DOT before I think we would even consider it, because it's a moot point if you can't make the curb cut.
Correct.
But going through to the DOT before the city and then having the city turn it down would be even worse, because it takes so long. I think that it's important to get the city's feedback on that first. Because it could take years, I mean, a year or so. You know what I mean?
Chicken and egg.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be bold enough to say that I would vote to deny the second curb cut as submitted.
I support that as well, Glenn. I would vote probably to deny. I would vote to deny that as submitted.
Can I back up and ask a question, I guess, about zoning? Because there's some of the staff comments are about the height of the structure. And, you know, I believe this parcel would be large enough for multiple dwellings. So I don't know that, in my mind, there could be something that is even technically taller than this if it were sensitively designed and appropriately sited and all that. I don't know that height in and of itself is an issue for me. And I just want to ask Neil, zoning wise, did this structure need any kind of permission at all? Is it bound by the accessory building limits or no?
There were no issues zoning wise. So, I mean, like I said, the proposal for the previous developers were to subdivide this and build 4 houses, which I'm sure would not be 1 story.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, like, imagine in theory a structure where closer to the street and the pool was behind it, and that structure was compatible with the main house, but not necessarily super short. I don't know. I think there are a lot of possibilities here. Yeah. So I guess my point being that height itself is not an issue for me, theoretically.
Julia, I would agree with you. I don't think, to me, it's not as much the height, because I think they probably could build, something larger there even, but I think it's probably more of the relation with the, kind of being a rooftop deck. And I don't know, I might be crossing the line, but kind of as we talked about a hot tub on a roof 2 weeks ago, I mean, if this building that Neil's designing, gets a couple umbrellas on the roof and a fire pit and whatever else, it turns into something very different from a classical looking building. And, we obviously can't control the furniture on the roof, but that's where I think leaving things like that open to interpretation become a little bit problematic.
Yeah, to add to what Julia and Glenn are saying, and I agree with my fellow board members, those that agree, I think a pool and a pool house can certainly fit on this site. And I agree with the comments that this maybe needs to be scaled down, but I'm with Julia that it's not the height that bothers me when I say scaled down. I don't think the height's an issue. It's just a general scaling down and maybe further defining that what can be done with that rooftop or how it's designed. I am remembering the conversation we had a few weeks ago and what that might open the door to. That's all I have.
I'll get back to my comment of opportunity. And I think there's opportunity here to have a really, really great master plan and a beautifully detailed pool and pool house. I just don't think we're there yet.
Okay, and along the lines of height not being a problem for me, I would say that also, in theory, if there were an additional access to this super wide street frontage, if it were well conceived and cohesive with the whole project, I wouldn't necessarily oppose a second opening. I'm gonna try to make a motion and see what happens for denial with staff comments 1, 2, 3, 5, and that's all.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for denial with staff comments 1, 2, 3, and 5. Do I have a second?
And let me add a board comments to restudy the site plan as a basis for design.
All right, we have a revised motion on the floor for denial with staff comments 1, 2, 3, and 5, and a board comment to restudy the site plan as a basis for the design. Do I have a second?
Two.
Glenn, did you have any other a board comment that maybe you wanted to throw out there?
No, I think I'm comfortable with it. And I think the applicant has heard our discussion. I mean, I think that I'll second this because I think that the applicant has heard enough to be able to kind of go back to the drawing board and rethink this.
All right, I'll put the motion to a vote. Fillmore?
Nay opposed.
Bill?
Nay opposed.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Glenn?
Okay, in favor?
Chair votes with the majority and the motion passes 3-4, 2 against. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you.
We're on agenda item number 5, 0 Gibbs Street. Kim, you'll provide an introduction.
Thank you. 0 Gibbs Street is requesting conceptual approval for new construction of a one-car garage and modifications to the fenestration. The building's a category 4 in the Charlestown neighborhood in the Old Historic District. Here's an aerial on the north side of Gibbs, almost to Legree Street, and some existing site photos. Little buildings tucked back there somewhere. You can see the turret. This is looking east on Gibbs and looking west. Sanborn maps from 1888, 1902, and 1944. And with that said, I'll turn it over to the applicant for the presentation. Mr. Duffer, you have the floor whenever you're ready.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, good, thanks. My name is Phil Duffer and I'm with Duffer Young Architects. We're requesting conceptual approval for the renovation of 0 Gibbs Street. That includes the construction of a new one-story accessory building in the general footprint of the existing garage and minor changes to the existing fenestration on the residence. If you'd indulge me, I'd like to read my notes to describe the project. If we could go to slide 2. Zero Gibbs was originally the carriage house that served a large Victorian dwelling at the east, to the east that faced Legree Street. These buildings first appeared in the 1888 Sanborn maps, and the house was demolished in the 1960s. 0 Gibbs was adapted into a residence soon after and was heavily altered. A new outbuilding was constructed and the garden was developed at that point. In the 1980s, a subsequent hip-roofed addition was constructed along with an expansion of the accessory building. This particular addition and the accessory building have been approved by this board for demolition. Today, after the loss of the Legree Street residence and the subsequent subdivision of the property, This now independent structure finds itself in a unique situation, nestled at the rear of a parcel with Gibbs Street frontage. Zero Gibbs present suggests a grand valley to be discovered through a long hidden garden. Our goal is to retain this unique quality of the building site as a discovery through a landscape forecourt and linear garden. If you could go to the next, I think slide 4, Kim. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. We've worked closely with Mortimer Klein, landscape architects, to incorporate the layout of the garden at this early stage. And the design proposed is included in this application as it is a key component to the additions and alterations proposed in this application. Next slide. The accessory buildings with the proposed design, the existing forecourt and the general footprint of the existing garage will be retained. The proposed single bay garage is a modest brick structure with a parapet and a low sloped hip copper roof that serves as a garden wall backdrop to the landscape forecourt and parking court. Beyond the garage and the garden wall, which is just beyond the garage door there from the street, is a diminutive open pavilion referencing the Victorian vernacular of the house with its pagoda-style copper roof supported by slender paired wood columns. The pavilion and the garden and the garage, are hyphenated by a flat roof, garden storage area clad with wood lattice that will be painted dark and planted to recede into the garden setting. Next slide, I think several slides to the elevation. That shows you just a closer look at the accessory building itself with the pavilion, the storage link, and the garage. And you can see where the wall is placed between the parking court and the garden area. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. One more. Okay, this shows you the elevation, the south elevation facing Gibbs Street. At the main house, south side, the existing terrace doors and transoms will be replaced with a more appropriately styled French door without the transom to allow a more graceful proportion. The existing hip entry canopy, wood door, and fan light near the southeast corner are proposed to be removed as the new entrance is located to the center, more to the center of the house. The new entry is inset into a shallow paneled recess. So it's the door, the French door kind of at the center of the elevation will actually be the entrance. This detail allows some protection from weather without the addition of an architectural element, which would interrupt the rhythm of openings along that terrace. At the south facade situated behind the garage structure where the addition is to be removed, you can see that in the existing. We're proposing a grouping of 3 French doors facing a terrace and a pool at grade, and then you will look beyond that to this pavilion from the interior of the house. Above this area at the existing second floor roof terrace, an existing window is proposed to be replaced with French doors and side lights with a shallow copper canopy for shade and protection from the weather. This helps to maximize south light at the interior and gives more appropriate access to the existing roof terrace. We're also adding a chimney to the west side and will be detailed to match the chimney, which is to remain. And we are asking to replace all the double hung windows with wood French casement windows. These are not, those windows are on the sides that are not visible from the public right of way. And I don't know, Kim, if you want to just, I think you've already clicked. So yeah, that's the rear of the house where those windows would be replaced. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Dufford. my fellow board members have any questions for the applicant?
This is Bill. I just have a couple of quick ones. Phil, that new chimney, is that for a wood burning fireplace, or mainly asking from a code standpoint?
It will be a gas fireplace.
Okay, so probably that compliant height of code may or may not be applicable there. Something to think about. Also, Kim, is there a site plan real quick just to pop back? And while she's doing that, Phil, one more thing. Can you elaborate on, you had mentioned that between your 3 new proposed structures up front, the pavilion and then the sort of connection element, can you just describe the articulation of the materiality of that wall? I'm just trying to get it from the rendering here. Can you walk us through that real quick?
Between the pavilion and the garage?
Yeah, I think you called it the flat story. What did you call it? The flat? I forgot what you called it.
Yes, there will be the brick garage structure.
Mm-hmm.
And then that visually the site is kind of divided at that point with the garden wall. And then you enter the garden, and then leading from the garage to the pavilion is that enclosed, it's like a garden shed, and it's going to be clad in a like a 12 by 12 gridded pattern that will receive plant material.
It's like sort of an applied lattice.
Right, and it'll be tight applied.
Okay. And then on the site plan, what I was just wanted to look at real quick. Okay.
Now,
yeah,
you're
I
seeing
think this answers.
that is the old site plan, the old garden layout that you're seeing
Mm-hmm.
on that slide. So that one gives you a better idea of the proposed.
Right, and you're reusing all those walls and entrance location and all that in this
Those are
proposed
new-
plan, correct?
Those are new walls. The existing walls are
Oh.
pierced brick walls, and these will be new walls.
These are new walls. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
They're in similar locations to the existing walls, but it's just a little different organization. And like we don't have as much driveway going forward towards the house now. There was a big turnaround and a deeper drive. We're trying to minimize some of that.
Mm-hmm. And I think as we met on site, I think, when was it you had mentioned probably that landscaping existing was established? Was that in the 70s or? I can't
Yes,
remember.
when this building
Yeah.
when the building was first renovated into a residence, I think it was in 1968. And so that garden and the accessory building, and then that whole 1-story brick facade, 1-story portion with the terrace on the top, that was added at that same time too. And then the little pyramidal, the little hip roof structure then was added in, I think, 86, and they added to the garage at that time.
And is that because of the shape of that pyramidal structure that was added in 86, that entry at the house proper that you're changing had the same sort of articulation to it? Was that also added, do you think, at that time, or was that something they copied?
I think that was added at the same time during the 86 renovation, because you can tell from the building material and the detailing of the roof edge that it's all the same.
Great, thank you.
Any other board questions at this time? All right, we'll move on to public comment. Frankie, do we have anyone speaking from the public?
We do not have anyone signed up to speak.
All right. Kim, if you'll give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
I will. We feel that this is an appropriate submittal and we're in support. So we're recommending conceptual approval with final review by staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Mr. Duffer, did you want to respond to anything raised during staff comments?
No, I just thank you and ask you to have the happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Mr. Duffer. All right, I will open it up at this time for board discussion and a vote.
This is Bill. I'll go ahead and jump in since I've been talking. I support staff's recommendations, and I think it's sort of a positive. We're actually seeing a proposed structure that's really as diminutive as what was there before, but done in a better way, and actually a cumulative diminishing of presence of structures on the property, which is giving it more air and light, which is a nice thing. So I agree with staff's recommendation.
I feel pretty much the same. I think this is a very sweet property that has a shyness about it, which makes sense since it was a dependency originally. And I'm totally fine with it turning inward and really embracing its identity as an oasis. And I'm even fine with there being a trash enclosure up front. I just might eventually like to see what that looks like since it's the closest thing to the public right of way. The changes to the fenestration are sympathetic, and I have no issue whatsoever with the pavilion garage structure. I like it.
Wilmore, do you have any comment?
Oh, no, I'm in agreement with what's been stated and with staff.
I agree as well. I think it's nicely done, and the changes are positive. And I don't have anything to add beyond Bill and Julia's comments. So I would make a motion for conceptual approval with final review by staff and a board request for garbage enclosure detail to be submitted with those final drawings.
Second that.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for conceptual approval with final review by staff and a board request for the garbage enclosure detail to be submitted with those final drawings. We have a second by Julia. I will put it to a vote. Bill?
Yay in favor.
Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Glenn?
Yay in favor.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Dufford.
Thank you.
All right. Agenda item number 6 has been deferred due to appeal of the zoning administrator's decision. We are on agenda item number 7, 19 King Street. Kim, please provide an introduction.
19 King Street is requesting final approval for hardscape, including modification of wrought iron, entry gates, and stucco walls. The building is a category 2, that's why it's before you today. It's in the Charleston neighborhood. It was built in 1735 in the Old and Historic District. Here's an aerial. It's at the corner of King and Lambeau on the north side of the street. And here's some context photos. And here's the location in question for the new gate. This is looking east on King and west. This is on Lambeau Street. And Sanborn maps. And with that said, I'll turn it over to the applicant for the presentation.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, great. My name is Doyle Best. I am with Werdemer & Klein Landscape Architects. Thank you for having us this evening, and we are excited to present this project at 19 King Street. We also have the homeowners on the call, Bonnie Weaver Miller and Brent Miller, so they can be available for questions if needed. We can move on to the next slide. There we go. So this project, we're working with the homeowners to redesign their garden. Really, the overall goal of the project is to reduce the hardscapes, narrow the existing driveway. Currently, it is a double vehicle access down to a single vehicle access, and then add pretty extensive planning just to soften the hardscapes throughout. So with that being said, we can kind of move through the plan set. Next slide, please. This is our removals plan. As you can see, we're going to remove essentially all of the existing hardscape. There's an existing non-historical in nature brick paving in the driveway area, as well as some irregular bluestone throughout. There's also an existing synthetic turf putting green of sorts that will be removed as well. So next slide. Okay, so this is our layout plan showing the new hardscapes going in. Looking to the bottom left, again, reducing the overall width of the driveway opening on Lambeau Street to a single vehicle access with brick running bond drive. With driveway runners there. All of the hardscapes, all of the bricks used throughout will be the old Carolina, handmade bricks, as well as the stone paving throughout will be natural cleft bluestone. So you see that there. One thing to call to your attention is the existing columns and stucco wall facing Lambeau Street. You can see where it is indicated what is existing and what will be new that we are proposing as part of this renovation. Next slide, please. These are just our paving details, again, showing kind of what we'll be doing with the brick running bonds for the driveway as well as throughout the project. Next slide. Okay, so this is our proposed elevation for the new columns and stucco walls, 7'6" columns with, that is the existing height of the existing columns, 6'6" wall, that is 6 inches higher than the existing wall. We are requesting that change. We just feel that it really, the scale fits better. If you move to the next slide, the top is the current elevation, the bottom is our proposed elevations, again, with the additional columns, the additional height to the wall, and then most notably, the reduction in the amount of the width of the wrought iron gate, but slightly more ornate in detail with the rosettes, the pickets with the finials to match the existing fence on the property. One thing of note, and I think it's included later in the presentation, is we did scale down the level of the ornate detail with that drive gate based on comments from staff. Our original proposed drive gate and pedestrian gate are shown on the bottom with this slide. Based on those comments, we reduced that, altered the appearance slightly, and landed where we are with the top gates and walls with the columns. If you'll back up just a few slides, please. Keep going. Keep going. Okay, stop there. Oh, well, one thing to mention right there, if you'll back up, currently out on the front entry on King Street, there are brick steps with a wrought iron handrail. We are incorporating a very similar brick steps with wrought iron gate accessing the rear of the house that will be visible from Lambeau Street. And we think it ties in really nicely with the existing conditions out front. Next slide. Again, this is just our basic landscape plan. We won't go into many details there, but again, just incorporating a lot of plant material to really soften the hardscapes throughout the project. Next, please. You can skip that one. The final plan here is just our lighting plan, and I know it's not technically in BAR's purview, but just something of note. It's a very tasteful, very minimal site lighting plan with 4 uplights highlighting the 3 specimen crepe myrtles throughout the property, as well as the 1 specimen Japanese maple, with 15 path lights throughout the garden, really for safety and circulation along those walkways throughout the garden area. Next slide. These are just the details of the lighting fixtures that will be used throughout the garden, pretty standard for our projects. Next slide. Again, this is the existing conditions along the top, and with this one, our proposed wrought iron details with columns and walls is the top image. The bottom image was what was previously submitted and altered based on staff comment. With that being said, that is the extent of my presentation, but would open it up for any questions you may have. And again, the homeowners are on the call as well, so that he may be able to answer anything you may have for them.
Thank you, Mr. Best. Do my fellow board members have any questions for the applicant? All right, we'll move on to public comment. Frankie, do we have anyone speaking from the public?
Yes, we have Anna Catherine Carroll.
Thank you, Anna Catherine Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society holds an exterior easement on this property that requires our review and approval for landscape and hardscape modifications. We learned of this request when the BAR small agenda was published and have only had time to give the plans a cursory review. While we are generally comfortable with the direction of the proposal, we still need to evaluate the details of the request and conduct a site visit. Therefore, our approval has not yet been provided, but we look forward to working with the applicant on this project and feel optimistic that we can reach a positive outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna Catherine.
That is the only person we have signed up to speak.
Thank you, Frankie. Okay, Kim, if you'll give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
We have to recommend deferral for that reason. Otherwise, BAR staff is in support of the project.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Mr. Best, did you want to respond or clarify anything raised during the public comment to the city staff comments?
I would like to respond or at least make a request. We understand and fully support the Preservation Society with their easement and their need for a site meeting. That will be taking place next week with Aaron from their director, with Cheryl Cave from our office. I would like to request that the board take that into consideration and potentially consider approving or issuing final approval contingent upon approval from the Preservation Society after their site visit. We initially submitted this application back in late July and have been on hold since. So now that we have finally gotten to the BAR meeting, we would like to try to continue to move forward with this project.
Thank you, Mr. Best. All right, I'll open it up for board discussion and a vote at this time.
I'll go first if that's okay. My comments are brief in that I think the main reason we're looking at this is because of the driveway gates and the opening changing on Lamball. And I think the scale of what they're proposing is far better than what is currently there. And I appreciate the pinching in, if you will, of the exposure to the back of the house that has always felt really open. So I would, I think after we discuss this, I would be comfortable making a motion for conditional approval, as we recently did on a different application, so that once that box is checked with the easement holder, their approval would then be triggered without having to come back before the board, if my fellow board members agree with that.
Sounds great.
So Glenn, that's conditional final approval?
Yeah, I would, if I were stating the motion that I wrote down earlier, it would be conditional final approval pending full approval from the easement holder.
I agree with that as well.
Is that a motion on the floor, Glenn, for final approval?
Well, if I'm not cutting anyone else's comment time off, then I'm happy for it to be a motion. But Bill Moore, did you have anything?
I just had a question, maybe of Lindsay or staff, and if we approve that conditionally, is that condition binding?
I know from those easements, they do have to get Preservation Society's approval. So the only issue with doing that is if there were any board comments to this design at this time, because if we did give final approval, then once the applicant has Preservation Society's approval of the design, it's not coming back. Is that your question, Fillmore?
No, I just had a question. This process, before they can move forward with this, they have to have our approval. Just assuming there was no easement, They would have to have our approval, and then they could go pull a permit and proceed with this work. I just want to make sure there's a condition about meeting the requirements of the easement on our part is binding. Because I think and I'm fine with the design. I would vote to approve it, other than the fact that the requirements of the easement have not been fulfilled at this point. And I'm fine with approving it if there's reasonable assurance that the condition that those requirements be met before the next step, which would be to go through the permitting process, that's binding, and that
I agree with you fully, Fillmore. I mean, this board cannot overstep the easement holder. And really, the applicant should have, there's a box to check in filling out the application, and this should have been taken care of ahead of time. But, there are times when there's a new owner, or the easement, it can slip by, or the email can get lost. So I can understand that. But my motion would be subject to the easement holder being fully comfortable with the application as submitted. If the easement holder had any changes to the submittal, it would need to come back before us to start fresh.
So, Glenn, the way I have this would be final approval contingent upon approval of the easement holder of the application as submitted.
I think that's fair. I think that checks the box with regard to, if Preservation Society has any changes, then it would need to be back to us.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. Thanks, Glenn.
Yeah, our approval, just to clarify, our approval would not be triggered until Preservation Society has given it a signature.
That's how I have this. Julia, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, would final review by staff be appropriate?
Yeah, I think that's appropriate from my part.
Well,
would we change our motion then to maybe a I don't know, a conceptual approval contingent upon with final review by staff? So that if there were any detailed changes.
Well, may I rescind my motion?
Yes.
I think I'm going to try to clean this up. I'm sorry, but I want to make sure that we're not, overstepping the easement holder. I'm going to make a motion. I'm going to make a motion for deferral with final review by staff pending full approval of the easement holder being provided.
Brilliant. I'll second that.
So we have a motion on the floor for deferral with final review by staff pending approval by the easement holder. And we had a second from Julia. Glenn, did I accurately restate that motion?
You did. Thank you.
All right. I will put it to a vote. Bill?
Yay, in favor.
Fillmore?
Yay, in favor.
Glenn?
Yay, in favor.
Julia?
Yay, in favor.
The chair votes the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Best.
Great, thank you.
Moving on to agenda item number 8, 563 King Street. Kim, provide an introduction, please.
Thank you. 563 King Street is requesting after the fact approval for right angle signage and lighting. The building's not rated in the Canterbury-Elliotboro neighborhood. It was built in 1894 in the Old Historic District. And here's an aerial showing the location of this property just south of Cannon Street. Here's an old image of the building. It has changed businesses. Looking northwest on King and south on King. Sanborn maps don't give us much information there. And the applicant wants to take it from here. You have the floor.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for your time this evening and for hearing us out. First page shows the facade or awning sign. We're basically constructing this puppy out of aluminum and acrylic. The aluminum would be the frame, the gold rectangle around the whole thing. The silver in the center. Inside of that frame is acrylic with a pearlescent finish on it. The copy is in aluminum as well, and all the details should be listed there in front of you. The right angle sign that we're also proposing is constructed in a very similar way, although not in a rectangular fashion, more of a hexagonal setup. Same type of thing, the same type of elements, excuse me. The frame is going to be aluminum. The inside portion is going to be that same pearlescent acrylic, and then the graphic of the honeybee along with the copy, the honey hive, will be aluminum as well. The dessert savory late night at the bottom, if allowed, is out of cut vinyl and will be flat, directly mounted onto the pearlescent acrylic. The whole sign, the awning sign is obviously going to go just above the entrance on the awning that is existing. And then the right angle sign, as shown in the rendering photo, would go to the left of the entrance, separating that building from the neighboring building to the left is an alleyway. I'm not sure if you can see that on any of the maps. So we're not necessarily directly on top of the neighboring tenant or business. We're obviously open to questions and comments as you have them.
Do we have any board questions at this time for the applicant?
You're asking for both of these signs, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And one of them is already installed, the one on the awning?
It was approved and installed. Yes, ma'am.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it was approved, so only the right angle sign is before us?
Let me just clarify. The facade sign was approved and installed. This right angle sign was not approved, but it was installed, and both are installed with illumination, which was not approved.
So before us is the illumination of the facade sign and then the design and illumination of the right angle sign.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So the right angle sign is installed. I drove by today, but somehow I didn't notice that.
It is not up, no, ma'am.
Okay.
And we did not install it.
So maybe it was installed for a
But
minute.
it was
installed.
The sign was provided to the client. We initially designed it and with the understanding that it was either going to be used for interior use or potentially somewhere down the road being permitted for exterior use, either in its current location or somewhere else on the property or building.
Any other board questions at this time?
I have a question for staff to clarify per line ordinance exactly what about this is not, you know, what is the technicality that we're considering here, I guess is my question.
So this sign, the right angle sign is too large. It should be less than 9 square feet, and this is exceeding 10 square feet. And they're both illuminated, which according to the sign policy statement is not prohibited.
At all, is that correct?
Case by case basis.
If I may interrupt,
Generally not permitted.
We did some square footage base, calculated the area for the hexagon shape. And it came out to just be right under 8 square feet. But I can understand if the city has a box rule rather than calculating for, empty space, so to speak, with the hexagon.
That's correct. The box that you draw around it is determining size.
Understood.
Any other board questions at this time?
Thank you.
All right. Frankie, do we have any public comment?
We had a Jody Gregory signed up to speak, but I do not see her in the list.
She was the owner, right?
Yes.
That's Jody Nicole.
Did the owner want to speak or?
As far as I know, yes, if I may interrupt again.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Yes, so as far as the sign goes, it's not going to be illuminated. So what happened was when the sign was made, the right angle sign was made, it was made out of a translucent material that ended up being too flimsy, basically, for it not to be backed by something. So it has a wood backing on it, so it could not be illuminated from the inside. And that was once we had already gone ahead and made the sign. And so there was a strip light put around it to see if that would work, and it actually distorts the words, so it's hard to see the words. And that was just done to see what it would look like in that setting, and it doesn't work. So it would have to be lit from the sides or above, and that's a future conversation. But this is not, we're not asking for an illuminated sign to go forward. And then also the 8 square feet, I mean, would you consider, the hexagon shape, it would make it much, much smaller. If we were going by the box rule, at what point would we be able to be considered for a variance on that?
That's actually a zoning question.
So,
okay.
Ms. Gregory, so neither sign will be illuminated, neither the right angle or the facade sign?
Right. Yeah, there's 2 signs, all the way down the block.
Okay.
For all the businesses. I'm sorry?
No, that's all right. Thank you.
What I was saying was it's not, we're not asking for it to be illuminated.
Kim, is that a set rule that you have to measure it by the box?
Yes, it is in the zoning ordinance. So if they want to have and exceed 9 square feet, they'll have to go before the zoning board. This is happening on another project at this moment. I don't quite know how to handle this one.
It's a very well done sign. It looks amazing for King Street. This is, going to be our flagship store. We worked with Brooks Signs because they're awesome and do an amazing job. And so it just, when you're walking down King, you don't even know Honey Hive's there because everybody else has the right angle sign except us.
Frankie, do we have any other public comment?
We do not have anyone else signed up to speak.
Okay. Kim, would you give us city staff comments and recommendations, please?
Yes, I will. For policy statement, facade signs on King Street should not be illuminated, and illumination was not part of the permit package. It was approved as a non-illuminated sign. Additionally, the right angle sign exceeds the maximum size of 9 square feet per zoning ordinance, section 54-415. In addition, it is illuminated as well and installed without. So we're recommending denial. If you would like to see that sign on the building, it's kind of hard to envision it. That signage application, we have a photo of it.
Are you asking for a photo of it on the building?
No, I'm sorry. I'm screen sharing.
Oh,
it. You can see the screen. So now.
yeah, it's not excessively large, and it and the illumination will not be there. That was just a strip light to see how we could counteract the fact that it was supposed to be, you know, the original idea had to be, you know, put away just because that translucent piece couldn't be translucent.
Did the applicant have any response, any further response to the city staff comments and recommendations?
No, ma'am. We are not licensed electricians, so you know, we didn't necessarily hook those signs up to power. The LED illumination were afterthoughts, just to stress what Ms. Gregory was saying earlier. So that's that would be our response.
Thank you. I'll open it up for board discussion and a vote at this time.
Oh, Tim, I have a question of just still trying to make sure that whatever motion we end up with here is we understand, or that I understand what we are for the record if we deny this, we are denying illumination of either sign, and we would be denying the right angle sign because it is oversized based on the zoning ordinance. Is that correct? Okay,
that's right, Bowman.
And I guess one more question. I'm trying to kind of contextually, I wish I had seen it in place, because I'm curious how the right angle sign compares to, let's say, the sign immediately to the north. I don't know if your photograph goes out that far, Kim. I'm trying to tell, like, compared to the yoga sign 2 or 3 doors to the south. I mean, I get the shape of it. I mean, the aesthetic of it, I don't have an issue with. I think it's a matter of we, you know, as a board and for the BAR and the zoning ordinance, you have to make sure that the right angle signage on the street doesn't take away from the visibility of the architecture. And I have a little bit of a hard time telling in this photograph contextually how big that sign really is. If we've taken illumination off the table based on the applicant discussion, we're really down to the footage of the sign, which then is in part a zoning issue.
And the sign is 8 square feet as far as surface area.
Kim, can you go back to that cut sheet from Brooks that showed that sign and the dimensions on it? Well, that's it, Glenn.
I'm guessing that's larger than the ink sign to the north. I was trying to tell on Google Maps.
Yeah, My quick calculation says that sign is right at 1.4 square feet over the ordinance. So that's like, you know, nine inches by 9 inches.
I'm interested in how the city's in, I'm looking at the ordinance now. Right angle sign shall not exceed 9 square feet per face. Kim, you said you're dealing with this issue right now with another sign. Is it a similar shape and the city's interpreting it?
No, it came to the BAR and other projects, and they have too many signs.
Okay.
But again, BAR is the one that's in charge of signage now, even though some of the parameters for signs are in the zoning. So we're currently struggling with how to proceed in these cases.
Yeah, I think I'm just questioning with whether it actually, it does need a variance, just because I don't think the ordinance really says what, it just says 9 square feet per face. And I welcome the comments from my fellow board members if you know, how they would interpret this, but if it's 9 square feet per face, and this is 8 feet on the face.
I guess real quick, Lindsay, because Kim had stated that box rule is kind of the precedent. Is that right, Kim?
Yes, but I'm not sure where to find that.
That's
So
fine.
I just didn't know what zoning has been enforcing, you know, for whatever period of time. The box rule.
it has been the box rule.
Okay.
This is a difference of, I mean, this is a $6,000 sign too. So if you'd consider that, I mean, it is 8 square feet, which is under the 9. And it just took forever to get open. We just want to know, we want people to see that we're there, and it's not taking away from the architecture. If it was a box, even it would take away from more, but it's a hexagon hexagon. And it's a good ad. I mean, Ink next door thinks our sign looks awesome. You know, we haven't had any problems with neighbors not liking it or thinking that it was big. It's just.
Ms. Gregory, I appreciate your comments, but we're in board discussion at this time.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Well, apart from whether a variance is needed, my comments on this were generally that I liked the design. I like that it doesn't have a lot of extraneous language on it. I really like I like the shape of it. I think it fits with the business. You know, a honeycomb. I don't know if a honeycomb necessarily has that many sides, but I appreciate the design and how it complements the business. And I think it's really nice. I think that the only issue we're down to for me is whether or not a variance would be required to approve this in its current size.
I think it's a tough call.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we have precedent in the way things have been judged previously, according to Kim.
Actually, we just found sorry to interrupt you, Glenn. We just found the location in the ordinance where it says. The area of a sign composed of individual letters, numerals, or other devices shall equal the area of the smallest rectangle or square encompassing said letters or devices. So it is, in fact, in the ordinance, square root.
Okay.
It is the box. I mean,
okay.
I'll just go ahead and chime in here. I mean, I don't have anything against the sign, the design. I think if the ordinance is the box and it's 9 square feet and this is 10.4 square feet, if we approve signs that are oversized for the ordinance, then we're going to have to decide down the road, how much is too much? And, is too much, 10% is too much, 5%. And I think it's a slippery slope if we want to, if we want to be able to approve a sign like this that is not a rectangle or a square, based on the actual square footage of it, then I think we need, some effort has to be made to change the language of the ordinance. Because we're approving signs based on the way the ordinance reads. And so I certainly have, nothing against the design of the sign or the shape of the lettering, or, it's a fine sign. It just violates the ordinance. And I think and like I said, I just think it's a slippery slope when we start doing this, because all of a sudden now it's 20% it's okay.
I hear you.
Ultimately don't have anything to put our feet on when we start denying people signs that are slightly too big or way too big.
Well, Kim, do we even have the discretion to, would that not have to be resolved by zoning?
That's right. It does have to be resolved by zoning. The AR is not given the opportunity to approve an increase.
So then it would need to have a zoning variance, and then it would have to come back to us or to staff for approval from BAR, correct?
That's right.
Is this something that if we approve the design, everything except for the size of it, that it, final review by staff because we've approved? That way we're at least moving it along, assuming other board members have no problem with the design of it.
Are you talking about like a conditional approval conditioned on a zoning approval?
I don't know if it's a deferral for zoning approval and final review by staff.
Something like, yeah, that sounds good.
You're referencing approval of the design motif of the sign, not the size and not this sign, because the applicant has this sign, and that's the one that she stated she wanted to use. So you're saying the design of the sign and motif, if it conformed to the ordinance, would be acceptable to the board. Which I agree. I like the design of the sign. It's unfortunate that you couldn't just shrink it down to meet the ordinance, but I think Fillmore is exactly right. We could be really on a slippery slope if we start interpreting ordinances here. What really should go to the zoning board. So I mean, we could defer, I guess, the right angle sign presence. But Lindsay, to your point, we could say maybe as a commentary that we do like the design of the sign if it were just smaller. I agree with that, definitely.
If it were smaller, or if they get a variance, because I don't think we have authority to approve the sign as it is, especially given that Kim, I agree with you. I don't want us to be interpreting ordinances, but if Kim found a basis for the city's, basically the city is reviewing this in terms of the box, I don't think that we have authority to give approval to this today.
Yeah, I agree with that, Lindsay, and I think I like the sign. I like the design. I like the shape. I like the color. All of that. I just, it's the classic. You have to read the ordinance and make sure that what you draw is approvable before it's built. I mean, I don't think there would be any less advertising for the business if this were, 3 inches shorter in all dimensions or whatever that dimension would be to make it compliant. But it's very unfortunate that it's been built in an illegal size.
Well, I would go back real quick, Glenn, just to say, as the applicant, Jonathan, did state that they didn't construct the sign necessarily as an exterior right angle sign. It was just a generic sign that they constructed. So I don't want to put the specter of illegality on
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I get it.
them.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think those are all good points. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
What about, sorry, go ahead, Glenn.
No, I'm saying I think that we can't, just to echo, I think we have to defer to the zoning board.
So what about a motion for deferral of this application pending either a size reduction or a BZA approval and final review by staff.
We have a motion on the floor for deferral pending either a size reduction or BZA approval and final review by staff. Do I have a second?
Very quickly, Lindsay, Madam Chairman, I'm sorry. Julia, about that illumination, would that also be denial of illumination of signage?
Yeah, I mean, they clarify that it's not illuminated on their, documentation here.
Okay, I
Okay.
know Kim had kind of mentioned
Yeah.
that
We
as
can-
well. So.
We can add a board comment to be sure they don't accidentally illuminate it.
I'd clarify that.
Okay, so your motion is amended to incorporate a board comment that
Not to illuminate.
Not to
neither
illuminate.
sign should be illuminated.
Sure.
All right. Do I have a second for Julia's motion?
This is Bill, I'll second that.
Bill, I'll put it to a vote. Glenn,
Yay in favor.
Fillmore,
Yay in favor.
Julia,
Yay in favor.
Bill.
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you both. All right, we are on agenda item number 9, 10 South Adgers Wharf. Kim, if you'll provide an introduction, please.
Thank you. 10 South Edgeworth Wharf is requesting final approval for window replacement with impact glass wood windows. It's the Colby Heritage Series that they're requesting. Building's a category 4 in the Charleston neighborhood and was built in the 1840s, Golden Historic District. And here is the wrong context slide. Sorry. Oh no. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. Here are the existing openings. You can see. Oh, these aren't content slides. This is oh my gosh. This is the applicant's presentation. So I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Ms. Reeves, you're on mute.
Hi, I actually think Julie Keys is presenting for us. I hope she's there.
I see her. Ms. Keys, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry about that. Hi, this is Julie Keys from Steelmarsh Architecture. Thanks for your time this evening. So yes, this is 10 South Adgers Wharf. It is a originally built as a warehouse structure, cotton warehouse structure in the 1840s, and was converted to residences in the 1940s. And we are requesting to replace all the windows. They're currently wood single pane windows that were installed in early 2000s in a renovation. So they are not historic windows. And we would like to put in the Colby Heritage Series as a single pane impact. So visually they are like in kind. You can scroll to the next slide. Just more photos from South Adgers, and then next slide. You can see it's very minimally visible from North Adgers, just that top dormer. And then we also included, the owner shared this article from 1948, which is interesting. It's about how the warehouses were converted to residences, and note the existing openings were shuttered at that time. So technically, first true windows were installed in the 1940s. The warehouse structure did not have windows. Next slide. see throughout the Sanborn maps the evolution of South Adjers Wharf from cotton warehouses to residential in 1951, and it shows how 10 South Adjers was actually split into 2 units. Next slide. Again, the specs for the Colby Heritage Series, painted pine interior and exterior, single pane impact glass. So it would be a performance divided light, not a true divided light that's currently there, but because it would be single pane, it's virtually impossible to tell the difference from the outside. You know, you don't have, it's not insulated glass that has the spacer bar in between. So it will be exactly as built. Mutton bars, exactly as, you know, they currently have 7/8 mutton bars. We'll be matching everything profiles exactly. And we'll also be building back the panels beneath the windows on the 2nd floor and on the 1st floor. Go to the next slide. We have some cut sheets from Colby. It's kind of unique for them to do impact single pane. So this is actually showing showing the Heritage Series, and then the second cut sheet, it's showing the single pane glass, just for you to see both components that they would make custom for this residence. And I didn't get to include it in the presentation, but went by 4 Beaton's Alley, which has these same windows installed in historic district. And as I said, they're pretty hard to tell the difference between a true divided light. And obviously the owner would like to have the impact protection given the location that she's in. And I believe that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Keys. Do my fellow board members have any questions for the applicant?
Real quick, I'm sorry, Julia?
No, good.
Okay. Julia, this cut sheet right here, is this the applicable? It's showing, it looks like aluminum cladding. Am I seeing
No,
that?
really the first cut sheet is the most applicable, being the
Okay.
series. That is just showing the single pane glass. So everything about this one, it's wood interior and exterior.
Okay. And then the bars are applied to the glass on both sides.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, by the way, did you have any, you didn't have any pictures of that other at Beaton's, did you?
I did. I emailed them to staff, but I didn't send them in time, so I don't know if they're available to pull up or not.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Julie, I have one question. Do you have any knowledge as to what the windows are on the unit on the east end? I think that was a renovation by Glenn Keys, probably maybe 7, 8 years ago. And I think all of those windows were replaced. I'm just curious what they use down there.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. I did. The owner believes that those are impact rated, but I didn't get exact proof of that. They're a metal window made by Dynamic Windows, which is a company that's no longer in business. And the rep did still respond to my email and said, you know, he didn't have the documentation of that anymore. But we know that those aren't insulated and that they're metal windows. And the owner believes that they're impact, but I don't have the proof in hand.
Thank you.
Julie, did you have a question?
No, not anymore.
Any other board questions at this time? All right, we'll move on to public comments. Frankie, do we have anyone speaking from the public?
We do not have anyone signed up to speak.
All right, Ken, if you'll give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Yeah, staff feels that this is an appropriate submittal and is in support. We recommend approval. Just to clarify though, on Ford Beedens, they were approved as single pane TDL and not the impact glass. They were supposed to be installing the Victor belt. So I'm not sure what happened there, but 22 Elliott Street also has this same high quality wood window. And the reason it's before you today is because, you know, this doesn't qualify as in kind. So we are concerned with the way that the townhouses will appear, but they already have mismatched windows. So we feel this product is a quality product and should be approved. Thanks.
Thank you, Kim. Ms. Keys, did you want to respond or clarify anything raised in the staff comments and recommendations?
I'll just say in regard to Fort Beedens, that was from the Colby rep sent me there, and I don't have any other knowledge of exactly what's installed there.
All right, I'll open it up for board discussion and a vote at this time.
I agree with staff. I'm comfortable with this. The existing windows are not original, nor are they wonderful quality. And I do believe that the proposed window is the high quality window, and I appreciate that they're doing wood exteriors and taking on the maintenance of that.
I concur. I think the difference here, and you know, anybody who were to go back and look at our record from today of replacement of if we were to approve these, you know, essentially replacement windows, that the key is that these are non-original and really non-historic, and the others on the street are already kind of mismatched. So I think considering all of those factors, I have no objection to an approval.
I agree with staff on this.
I'll make a motion for approval with staff comments regarding the dimension drawings.
Does that mean, Glenn, that you only want staff comment 2?
Yes, but yeah, because one really is an observation. So I make a motion for approval with staff comment number 2.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor with staff comment number 2. Julia, with that modification, are you still a second?
Yes.
All right, I'll put it to a vote. Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Bill?
I'm going to say yeah in favor. Make sure this was final approval, correct? You just said approval.
Glenn, was your motion for final approval?
Yeah, it's just that they just had to cross that hurdle, but yes, correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, in favor.
You second that final approval as well?
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. And Fillmore, your vote with the modification is still, your vote for that final approval is still effective? All right. Bill?
Yeah, in favor. Yeah, in favor, Lindsay.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Glenn?
Yeah, in favor.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Keys.
Thank you.
All right, agenda item number 10. We are now in a discussion and potential action to express support for additional staffing in the city's budget to assist the City Board of Architectural Review. Kim, I don't know if you want to give an introduction to this, or I can say that we submitted a letter, certain board members from BAR Large and Small submitted a letter to the mayor on September 20th, 2021 on this issue, sort of going through the history. And Kim, if you wanted to give any other information, and then I think we'll move into public comment.
So I believe that the mayor has requested additional staff support to the ad hoc budget committee. And so a board member raised the fact they wanted to have a discussion about this and just get the support out there. And that's the short of the back.
Thank you, Kim. And Frankie, I think we have some members of the public signed up to comment on this.
We do. We have first April Wood signed up to speak.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF would like to be on the record that we are in full support of additional staffing in the city's budget to assist the city's Board of Architectural Review. Established in 1931, the BAR can be credited for shaping the historic district into what it is today. The BAR has prevented demolition of hundreds of historic buildings and prevented inappropriate alterations to many times more historic buildings. Over the last few years, as the population has grown, the workload has increased dramatically, but staffing has not increased proportionally. We are concerned about the lack of enforcement and the long delays for approval. These two issues undermine the effectiveness of the BAR's decisions. We applaud the current staff for their hard work, but believe that it is essential for the city to hire more staff. Charleston's motto means she guards her temples, customs, and laws. An effective BAR is critical for the city to continue to live up to this motto. Thanks. You all know this. Thanks.
April.
We also have Anna Catherine Carroll signed up.
Thank you, Anna Catherine Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston, and we could not agree more with my colleague April at Historic Charleston Foundation. We are pleased to see the city propose in its 2022 budget additional enforcement staff for the BAR. Staff support is essential to support the decision-making of our volunteer boards, and this funding demonstrates that the city values the time and expertise these board members lend to maintain consistent design practice. Proper enforcement will also ensure fairness to all applicants, recognizing the efforts of those who adhere to the process. We are so fortunate here in Charleston to have the BAR as a review body that can help homeowners honor the dignity of the craftsmen who built this city. And in particular, staff support must keep pace to assist homeowners and foster greater awareness of the worth of these places to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna Catherine. Frankie, is there anyone else?
No, ma'am, that's all we have signed up.
All right, thank you. I think at this time, and normally this would be board discussion, but I think at this time we can just generally as a board put on the record any statements that each of us have in support of an additional staff member and support by the city.
Yeah, I had sort of prepared something just to put on the record, and it might reiterate some of the things that April and Anna Catherine said, but I'll just read it. As staff and many members of the public are aware, this board has been concerned for a long time about the capacity of preservation staff to adequately process and review and critically to follow up on all the applications they receive and all the approvals or denials that this board issues. In addition to the proposals we see here at the board meetings, there are hundreds, many hundreds, like 1,500 additional requests that they have to deal with every year. When I started working in Charleston more than 20 years ago, there was a staff member dedicated exclusively to enforcement, to ensuring the consistency of public authority to safeguard the built environment in the historic district. That position fell away during the Great Recession of 2008 to 2010, and for some reason it has never been reestablished despite multiple requests from this board and preservation staff. At the same time, the quantity of applications has grown exponentially, and while staff members are clearly working so hard to keep the system running, it's ever more evident that they're overwhelmed. This BAR review process, which is historic itself, and which has done so much to preserve the character of our city and render it a favorite destination worldwide, is only as strong as the logistical framework that underpins it. And I believe it's paramount that staff be properly supported and enhanced so they can do their jobs without undue stress or confusion. The work they do is essential to the architectural integrity of Charleston, and we would all benefit if they were encouraged and happy and wanted to stay in their roles for decades. If anyone else has comments on this topic, I'd welcome those, and ultimately, I would like to make a motion in support of Mayor Tecklenburg's recent request to include support for additional preservation staff in the upcoming budget in line with what the department has requested.
And this is Lindsay, just to put my comments on the record. During my time, my short time, 11 months on this board, I've been incredibly proud of the work that this board does, and seeing how hard the staff work, and knowing how important this decision-making body is and how many properties we actually have purview over, and how our work really supports the really maintaining the historic fabric of Charleston, and just knowing that the lack of adequate support staff basically guts our function. It's really frustrating. And so I really just reiterate what April has said, and Anna Catherine and Julia, and I'm very much in support of, and would ask that we do get additional support and a staff member for enforcement.
I too would like to add or vocalize my support for the mayor's request. And I personally would make a desperate appeal to our city leaders to approve the hiring of a staff member to assist this board and its employees in actually being successful at its charge.
And not everyone is required to comment. So if we simply want to make a motion at this time, Julia, I think you had originally made a motion, but I let others speak, including myself. Make a motion to take action in support of this. Fillmore, did you have anything to add?
No, I was just going to add that I am wholeheartedly in support of the mayor's proposal for additional staffing for preservation and planning. It is way overdue and desperately needed.
And I think at this time we can just put it on the record that we have taken action as a board, and this is on the record.
Do we vote on this motion? Because my support would be a second for Julia's motion wholeheartedly.
All right. Well, we have Julia. I'm trying to actually think of how to. Your motion was just really a motion for support of an additional of the mayor's request for an additional board member. Is that right?
Motion in favor of, in support of Mayor Tecklenburg's recent request to grant the preservation staff's request for support. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I was actually going to ask Kim, what exactly did the mayor do, so that basically I think the point of Julia's motion is to support whatever the mayor has proposed for the budget. So it was for one additional staff member?
I believe it was. I
1.5, I think.
Did not listen.
1.5 staff members? I think it was 1.5 staff members.
Yeah.
In any event.
Where do you find a half a person?
I'm kind of like a half sometimes.
Yes, we do that all the time. We fill half of the plate with work.
After 30 years, I'm ground down to a half person.
Yeah.
So Bill, are you in support of Julia's motion?
Definitely to second it, or are we just saying support? Yeah. Yes, I'm in support of it.
Well, I think we can officially put it on the record.
Okay.
And
yeah, second, and then, yeah.
I'll put it to a vote. Glenn?
Yay in favor.
Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Bill?
Yay in favor.
And the chair enthusiastically votes in favor, and the motion passes. Now we are on the final agenda item, which is adoption of the solar policy.
May I, before we move on to that, may I make a request? Because I didn't think it should be part of the motion, but I do think that either staff or the BAR members should politely, gently, very promptly inform City Council of this discussion and vote in favor of supporting the mayor's request. I think that is very important to structure properly.
Agreed.
Kim, not that you're overburdened. This is on me too, but could we get the, it's almost 8 o'clock. Can we get the draft out to me tomorrow? We can sign so that way we can submit it to City Council, the approved, this was the motion, this is what was approved. And then we can also, I mean, this is recorded, so.
I'll get that result to you before I leave the office tonight.
And I will definitely review it immediately.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay.
Okay. I felt like that should have been last on the agenda. Feel sorry. But now we're on the final agenda item, the solar policy. Kim?
So I'll just give the introduction that the last time this went before the board was October 14th of this year. And the crux of the discussion was regarding item number 5. And previously it was a hard no on attaching to historic roof. And so we have looked at the language of number 5 and made the most correction to that one. And then the rest of the language has been revised as well. But I can read it if you'd like, or you can, I know you've read it already before, but if you'd like me to read it, if that would be helpful, then I certainly will.
Unless anyone is opposed, I don't think you need to reread it, Kim. I read it before, but I welcome the comments from board members if someone wants Kim to read it.
I've read through it.
Or actually, this would also be a good time if anybody has any questions directly for Kim. We can do that now, or can you go to the second page of it that is 5? I can also pull it up on my computer.
We were trying to make it a one-pager, but that didn't work.
And sorry, did you say that has this also been run back by Historic Charleston Foundation and Preservation Society?
No, it has not.
Okay, but they're on, so we can get any comments.
I'm sorry. Lindsay, were you asking for comments? I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, go ahead, Bill, if you have questions.
I just had one more thing I wanted to throw out. Obviously, this addresses a lot of what we're dealing with, connection of solar panels, especially to historic roofs. Do we want to add anything in this statement about like solar trees or solar flowers or, all those different apparatus they have that people may want to put out, on their property or something? Is that something, because it is a solar policy, and do we want to see, I mean, the solar flowers are beautiful and they're cool and all that, but do we want to see them, in a historic garden or something like that? Since we're addressing solar, do we need to address all aspects of solar being something like that? I'm not trying to muddy the water here, but it could happen.
I think those would be, that would have to go to zoning as a structure. Would that be correct?
I don't know. They're not that big.
I think it would.
Really?
We also, so the part of the reason, and then maybe a solar tree, but we did expand the definition of solar collectors, but while expanding it, so if one of these trees wouldn't fall in the category of solar panels, solar film, or photo, whatever cells. Quite honestly, I don't know what solar trees are. That's a new one to me.
It's like solar panels on a stick.
Yeah, kind of
looks like a cell phone antenna. And they are a real thing.
Yeah, or the solar flower is the best one. So look that up. It's amazing. It's really cool.
I plan to. So I guess would that fall in the same category if I wanted to put a metal sculpture in my yard and my house as a category 2?
So the BAR
I
doesn't
don't-
have any purview over sculptures. It only has purview over structures, which I think maybe this flower could be considered. Fences and walls.
It would have to be because it's attached to the electrical system. It's concreted in.
To the house.
I think it would be any solar flower, tree, pinwheel, whatever, I think would have to be a structure for zoning review. And maybe we note that. I mean, we had a solar tree or a solar whatever come to us on
Down at the College of Charleston, wasn't it, Glenn?
well,
One of their
that
buildings?
but earlier we had one come to us right off of DeReef Park, one block south, not Carolina. Marion Street, yeah. And that was just sort of a weirdly conceived thing that did not get approval.
So I guess the question is whether we need to incorporate it in this policy because we would have purview over it, or whether it is within the purview of it's going to BZA. Well, I'm getting
there is a statement in here about freestanding structures in 5.
Yeah.
Which
so do we need to defer this for restudy?
I don't think so. I don't know.
says, all alternative means should be explored before penetrating historic materials, including positioning panels on auxiliary structures. Freestanding installations should cover, solar flowers, all of those types of devices, and locating panels on secondary roof forms, all with restricted visibility from the public right of way.
Yeah, that's all. I guess seeing that, it's almost like, I'm not going to say encouraging it, but it's, it should be explored.
More to those types of structures. I don't think there's any question about that.
I would just say, if somebody came along and wanted to put an array of solar flowers in a Lottrell Briggs garden, I wouldn't be too keen on approving that. So,
well, I think they'll always be case by case, right?
Yeah. And do we just say that, just leave it that way, case by case, as a freestanding?
I mean, that's the last line of this thing, right? That it'll all be considered individually.
Yeah, and do we just need to, I'm looking up in the first part of it where we're talking about solar collectors proposed to be installed on buildings. Should you say installed on properties where category 3 or 4? Because the whole purpose of that language is to say, it can't be visible from the public right of way, and it can't detract from the historic character. And that way we would have a basis to, require a solar flower tree to be in the backyard or to deny it because it detracts.
I think that's a good proposed amendment, Lindsay, with regard to property as opposed to structure.
Kim, I don't know if you have it in front of you, but it would be on basically that in that first section. I think the last 3 paragraphs refer to installation on buildings and installation on new construction. It should be installation on properties where the buildings are located on, or installation on property where new construction is proposed. And I actually think that minor tweak we could get. But while we're on this topic, well, quite honestly, I think we're probably sort of in board discussion right now. So it's a little out of order. So unless anybody has other questions, and I think we can address them during board discussion, let's go into public comment and hear from HCF and Preservation Society. Frankie, do we have either of them signed up to speak? I know they're here?
They are not signed up to speak, but they are still online.
April, I know that you had, I worked with you on this directly. So April, if you had any sort of input at this time, I would allow that.
Thank you. I don't have any additional input.
Okay. Anna Catherine, did anything from the Preservation Society?
No, thank you, Lindsay. We are comfortable and just we're interested to hear the outcome of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's now move back into board discussion and a vote. And on the note of sort of that's responding to Bill's comment about these sort of flower trees, is there any other solar structure that we might not be thinking about that's not covered? Not that I want to draft this for everything, but it seems like it's a,
I wouldn't think Tesla tiles or anything like that would fall. That's a materiality deal. That's about material, right?
Yeah.
Tesla tiles or anything like that. That wouldn't be. That
We'll
wouldn't be
do
in the
another
mix.
another statement for windmills.
I think that might fall in with, I think we can cover that though under the same sort of, you know, sculpture, yard sculptures.
I think you're, Lindsay, when you were talking about properties and everything like that, I think you were working on a good line of thought right there.
Yeah, instead of saying buildings, we just want to say properties, category 1 and 2 properties, and category 4 properties.
I think that works.
That would, you know, that would cover. You already have, you know, sort of purview over landscape changes that are visible. And so that would just define that so that, right, so somebody's not going to pop a solar daisy in the middle of their garden. Yeah, visible from King Street or Broad Street.
I want to see them, but you know, it's just me.
I also don't want to, in addition to that comment, I don't want to lose sight of the part we were all focused on last time, which was paragraph 5. And I think it sort of, we were allowing solar panels, and the language of 5 basically said, you know, no penetration whatsoever, which then basically most owners wouldn't be able to have them at all. So what's the point of the policy? So 5 has been revised.
I think it's really good. I mean, I do. I think it gives us a little bit of flexibility, but gives applicants good direction and kind of safeguards. I would make a motion to approve it with the one tiny change of that word buildings to properties.
We have a motion on the floor for approval of the solar panel policy, conditioned upon that revision, basically redefining buildings and making it properties. Do I have a second?
Second.
Glenn, was that you?
Yeah.
I will put it to a vote. Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Bill?
Yeah, in favor.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Glenn?
Yeah, in favor.
Chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. We have come to the end of tonight's agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.